We're good to go for the live stream again, so welcome back, everybody. We'll kick straight back to the presentation. If we can start back at the our role and responsibility piece, this is on the preparations for the arrival of highly pathogenic avian influenza. Thank you.
Kia ora. Maybe I'll just start the slide again. Yep. So we have 4 roles as a regional biosecurity leader. For the first, we facilitate regional communications between MPI and key stakeholders, as well as supporting local government preparedness planning. We convene the Waitaha HPAI group, which currently has representatives from DOC, LINZ, Fish and Game, Ngāi and Aoraki Environmental Consultancy. Apologies, they weren't captured on the original slide. We're also speaking with other PREs about this issue as well at the moment. As a landowner manager, we're responsible for managing sick and dead birds, as well as public health and safety on land that we own or manage only. As an employer, we're responsible for the protection of health, safety and well-being of our kai mahi. As a regulator, we're responsible for managing the environmental effects of carcass disposal. So what does it mean for landowners, public or private? All landowners are responsible for managing birds on the land that they own or manage. This responsibility applies to public landowners or managers such as territorial authorities, the Department of Conservation, and Land Information New Zealand, as well as private landowners. Effective HPAI response is dependent on agencies being prepared in advance rather than responding reactively. Planning ahead ensures management actions are efficient, timely, and coordinated. Agencies are expected to clearly understand their roles and responsibilities, including how birds are managed on their land and how waste is handled and disposed of safely. Roles, responsibilities, guidance, and best practice is shared and discussed through the Waitaha HPAI group. This forum provides a coordinated space for agencies and stakeholder organisations to align expectations, share lessons learned, and maintain readiness. So how have we been preparing? Comms plans are in place to ensure clear and consistent messaging. Key messages are supplied by One Health partners. The response plan continues to be refined, ensuring it remains a fit-for-purpose document and reflects current best practice, emerging risks, and lessons learned from overseas outbreaks. Although the plan will be approved by the Environment Canterbury HPAI steering group, it will remain a living document and be adapted to reflect the current bird flu situation. A dedicated response team has been established to manage any outbreaks on land that we own or manage. They've been fitted with PPE as per Te Whatu Order guidance and will receive training. We facilitate the HPAI group as a key coordination forum. We support the poultry industry, particularly by providing advice on large volume carcass disposal, which is a critical consideration during an outbreak to manage animal health, environmental risk, and maintain public confidence. We work collaboratively through Te Urukahika regional and unitary councils, Aotearoa, to ensure common approach, shared resources, and liaise with One Health partners and other regional councils. At a national level, MPI have been working directly with mana whenua. While we don't know the full impacts that HPAI will have on wildlife, we can assume that there will be a loss of taonga species. The virus is persistent in feathers, eggs, and bones, and mahinga kai sites are likely to be impacted, putting those undertaking cultural harvesting at a higher risk exposure. MPI has a contract with Māori environmental non-for-profit Te Tira Whakamātaki to provide specific guidance on the impacts to cultural harvesting. This is due before the end of June 2026. The Department of Conservation have been working closely with iwi on the vaccine trial for endangered manu species, which include kakapo, takahe, kaki, shore plover, and kakariki. In Waitaha, we've had representation from Ngāi and Aoraki Environmental Consultancy on the Waitaha group. We've sought advice on any tikanga specific to land Environment Canterbury managers, and will continue to incorporate this advice into our response plan. We've contacted all Papatipu Runanga via their environmental entities to ask how they would like to receive information and to be involved. HPAI causes significant impacts to both wildlife and commercial poultry. Overseas experience shows large-scale wildlife mortality events and disruptions to poultry operations once the virus becomes established. It can incubate in wild birds for 14 to 21 days with no visible symptoms. By the time we notice something wrong, the virus has often already spread widely within a colony and potentially beyond it. In many well-documented seabird outbreaks overseas, most transmission and the majority of deaths occur between 1 to 4 weeks of first detection. For example, greater skua colonies in Scotland in 2022 experienced an over 50% adult mortality within weeks, and gannet colonies in the UK and Canada recorded thousands of deaths over 2 to 4 weeks. Strong community distress and high media interest are expected, particularly where there are large numbers of wild birds die in visible locations. This combination is likely to create elevated expectations on councils and partner agencies to intervene quickly and visibly. As pressure builds, there is a real risk of scope creep where we are pushed to take on responsibilities beyond our mandate, particularly in relation to wildlife management and response leadership. Clear and consistent articulation of our role and responsibilities is essential to help maintain expectations and reduce decision-making risk during heightened public attention. So roles for councillors. Sorry, the picture might be a bit blurry. Before HPAI arrives, councillors play an important role in encouraging reporting of sick or dead birds. The Republic should be directed to the MPI Exotic Pest and Disease Hotline for all suspected bird flu cases. It's important to reinforce that the MPI website is the single source of truth at this time for official information and guidance. And after it arrives, councillors can help by supporting and reinforcing One Health messages. This includes supporting key messages around not handling sick or dead birds, reporting sightings promptly to MPI, and following any public health advice. Councillors can support and help the community understand what Environment Canterbury's role and responsibilities are during response, and how regional response activities fit alongside national leadership from MPI and One Health agencies. Ooh, I don't know if it will play. It might not. Well, it might. You might not have sound. Oh, no sound. Well.
So this is a short video MPI have only just released. What we'll do is we'll circulate the link to this. There is a sound that goes with it, but
I was going to say, does anybody want to try and make the sounds? I'm not offering. Nicholas Ward.
Kia ora, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. I think there's a fair bit of interest from councillors here, so I've got almost every councillor wants to ask a question. So if we can try and keep the questions brief so we can get to everybody's questions. We'll start with Councillor Campbell.
First up, this, you may or may not be able to answer this, so but just looking at the map of the spread, looking at that, one would assume that most of our highly migratory birds have been exposed already. And so I'm just wondering whether there is any understanding of the risk level to migratory birds versus endemic birds that don't travel anywhere. Is there any understanding of that, or is that not really known yet?
Through the chair, I don't believe we have a clear answer for that at this stage. It's not well known. Yeah.
Councillor Gerard.
I've got two questions. One is just that our role, the roles of different organisations, and the was the Waitata group. So my worry is my son worked on a poultry farm which had a factory. So in there you've got MPI doing food safety and then Whataora doing health guidance. It's sort of like, well, you've got two different agencies, and I sort of worry that one will expect the other to be doing it. It's sort of like, it's sort of making sure that it sort of feels like there should be just one person going to that factory and saying this is what we have to do, rather than two organisations having two different people and that sort of thing. It's sort of like I just would like to make sure that it's a really coordinated approach. And that's one question. Another question was around, we look after the rivers. So is it collecting all the birds from the rivers, and also who looks after the coastlines? Who actually does the pickup for the coastlines? That's my two questions. Oh, and I've got another question. Third question is I'm on the Waste Committee, for the Regional Waste Joint Waste Committee that Ashley and I are on. Is there a role there that we have a role in organising where these birds are to be disposed of, and how, do we, us councillors get involved with that at all? Thank you.
Through the chair, to the first question in relation to One Health, we have very limited influence at all in that space, but the purpose of the One Health response is to ensure that they are talking with one another, opposed to independently going about this. In terms of land management and the rivers and coastlines, it really depends in terms of who owns the land as to who will be responsible for managing any dead or sick birds on it. There are some spaces where land ownership is a little unclear, and we are working through that as a part of our response plan in terms of how we figure out how we manage those spaces. In terms of the Waste Committee, we were actually hoping to, in the near future, perhaps myself and Paige get along to the Waste Committees and give a bit of a presentation and ensure that there is a discussion that is happening there at the appropriate level. So that's on our to-do list.
Just to help on that first question that Councillor Gerard asked, it's around the accountability and the ultimate accountability of the decisions as MPI. Is that as the lead agency? Yeah. Next would be Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, I've got two questions too. Looking at the first map of the spread, pretty much it's on the opposite side of the Antarctica to us. Do we know, has it spread right across the Antarctica itself?
Did you want me to answer that question now? Yeah. It's spread to the Antarctic Peninsula, but it's not spread beyond that.
Okay. That does sort of tie in with Councillor Campbell's question as well. So I might have three, sorry. So given that MPI's got the surveillance roles, I'm presuming, or could I assume, and you should never assume, I know, that they're putting quite a bit of focus on our southern islands, because presumably it's going to hop up. So that's good. Yeah, we've got a yes there. And the third is, I've just been and actually had a look at our website. How far away are we having a bird flu logo put in there with a link to obviously the One Health site? I'm presuming that's how we're looking to operate that.
It will be really easy for us to link back. We just want to create the one source of truth back to MPI. So it would be really easy for us to put it on our website and link back to that. It's just a matter of putting a tile on, no problems.
So are we anticipating that anytime soon? I mean, I think that the people might obviously go and look for information. Nothing's coming up on our search, so it would be helpful just to actually possibly get that, presuming that the One Health site's up.
No, we will see that on our website soon. Yes.
Councillor Robinson.
No, thanks for this. I think it's quite timely. Last training, we had one particular councillor who had a history of working in Antarctica and was quite consecutively discussing this on and off for about 3 years. So it's really important that we address it now and our role. I think it's great. Thank you. And you've done very well in speaking for your first time to us. I know it can be quite daunting, but you wouldn't know. I have a few questions regarding, I guess, how we look at cases of, botulism and how that could actually be, something else, and how we learn from these particular cases. But I guess, I'm looking at the MPI website, and it has, in other countries, I guess, jumped species, and to include not beef cattle, but dairy cattle, and especially intensification. So looking at that and going forward, I think it would be really important for us to see where we sit with our key relationships, and how we can move forward with, Beef and Lab, Federated Farmers, and even some of the forest and bird and fish and game sort of situation, and where they sit. But also in the information provided today, you discuss the role of territorial authorities and Environment Canterbury in the disposal as well. We have a role there in finding locations for the disposal of these birds. And I just want to know, with a health and safety lens as well, where have we identified places for this? That's my first question.
Through the chair, so just to cover off the dairy cattle situation, our understanding, and Paige, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that that's happened in intensive dairy. We run our dairy cattle a little bit differently in New Zealand and some places overseas, so we may not have that same level of risk, not that we will have no risk. The second part, in terms of disposal and our role, so we're a regulator in that space. The waste stream really does need to be managed by the territorial authorities. We may have a space in terms of giving a level of direction in terms of where it's appropriate or to undertake the likes of composting, or when there's opportunities for burial, but we're more of a regulator and an advisor in terms of the waste stream as a whole. That really does sit with the territorial authority.
No, thanks for that. I guess in reading what we have here, it feels like an operational update, but to be governance ready as governors, we've got outlines of roles and intent, but I feel like it doesn't clearly address the triggers and the hierarchy of what happens and who does what and at what cost. And I know that's probably an evolving thing, but I think we need to be very quick on this. My question from that would be, knowing that we've got vulnerable areas like the estuary, and we've got a high amount of migratory birds as well as native birds, often in the very close vicinity of each other, have we identified some of our areas, say like, the braided rivers or the estuary, that we are looking at more closely with partners? Or
Through the chair, that's actually our next piece of work that we're working on right now, is looking at high-risk sites across Canterbury, including those that we directly manage and those that are managed by TAs. We'll also give some consideration to sites of high cultural significance in order to be prepared and just have a high-level approach should something happen in those areas.
Okay, so I'm going to extend for a couple 5 more minutes because we had that little break. And I've got Councillor Faulkner, Davis, Moody, and then Lamont.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Tash. Page 12, working with mana whenua. One of the things I thought of straight away was the Titiria Islands and the 36 islands down there, and the significant impact it could have in it. And Councillor Mackay indicated it may come from the south first, so they seem to be right in the firing line, and the impact on cultural harvesting will be huge. And I looked at the Te Teriu Whakamataki, the impacts. Can we get a bit more information on what that is, and also the manu vaccine? Because I'm probably looking at we're talking about dead birds, removal of dead birds, and on those islands, that's probably an impossibility. So how that would be handled, and I'm just interested in that whole concept and the relationship and how it impacts on Ngātahu.
Through the chair, we can bring that information back to council as it becomes available.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. This has been good because I like the way you frame the scenario that the public will be very upset and they'll be coming to us. And I'm looking at DOC's role and how they're trying to get a vaccination for the at-risk species. But that just means the ones that are at risk. So there'll be a lot of things dying. And I'm wondering if in our organization, would we look at a task force where we can actually help DOC? I mean, because we have some people here in this building who might have those skills. If it came to that sort of emergency, we need to get down there and we need to vaccinate, pick up birds, that kind of thing.
Through the chair, we'll definitely work with our partner agencies where we can. We just have to be a little bit careful in terms of scope creep and not undertaking other people's jobs.
Councillor Moody.
Thanks for the presentation, Paige. Appreciate it. So I'm thinking about keeping our birds healthy and the pressures that birds have already got in some areas, like in the lower Rakaia, where they can't eat the Stokel smelt fish anymore, up at Kaikoura, where there's less fish in the sea for seabirds there. And thinking about, our actions in this look like burying dead birds. And am I right in thinking, when I think about what we can do as ECAN, am I right in thinking that healthy birds would survive better the impacts of bird flu if we get their environment as healthy as we can before it arrives, rather than stressed birds that might already be suffering? Yeah.
I'm not sure we know the answer to that question, other than you would think, yes, a healthier population is going to be able to sustain itself better when a virus comes through. Yeah.
Fair enough. Just trying to turn our minds to what we can do rather than only the disposal thing. Thank you.
Councillor Lamont, we'll finish up with you.
Lovely. One question with several parts to it. Thank you for the presentation. Great. So high number of deaths, what percentages are we looking at? That's part A.
It would be variable. Overseas evidence suggests that there have been collapses of up to 98% of a population in 1 year, but we don't know how it will play out in New Zealand. It could be that much. We're not sure.
No.
Part B, if the bird survives, does it get immunity?
Yeah.
Part C, what's the half-life? So this pandemic, for want of a better word, will sort of have a bell curve. What's the likely duration? Does it have a sort of a long tail like our piwaka waka, for example, or are we talking 1 to 2 years at peak and then down, No?
Sorry, I thought I pressed it. Based on overseas, what's happened in the UK, for example, they had their first peak in 2020. Sorry, I think I misspoke before 2020, where it really peaked and then it troughed for about 2 years, and then they're in another spike now. So it's highly seasonal, but that's what we can go off. Spring and autumn.
And the last thing, are there one or two specific species that if we can't get them vaccinated that we have to look after at all costs, and what we...
So I'll just clarify on the vaccine trial that DOC were undertaking. It's for critically endangered manu, but the vaccine will only be available for captive breeding populations. It's not for wild birds. So sorry if that didn't come across. So the species that they've done the vaccine trial in will most likely be the species that is made available, because they need 2 doses within X amount of time. It won't be feasible for wild birds to be recaptured to give them the second dose. But yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, if it's very, very brief.
Sorry, and I know I'm using up a bit of time. So with regards to, on the MPI website again, it says that the culling of wild birds increases the spread of bird flu. So I'm looking at this side of duck shooting season, and is there a conversation that we could have prior to that we could somehow communicate?
Fish and bird or something.
It's really clear. It spreads through the killing of wild birds, and we don't have it yet. But what if we did, and suddenly we're
There's
in
a game
throes?
animal council, not game animal,
Yeah.
Fish and bird and fish. Is it fish and bird or fish and game?
So is there a
Fishing game, sorry.
conversation that we can jump on
know
and
that.
actually help them communicate it, just as a proactive thing rather than this knee jerk if we had to? I think it's it's there. So.
Through the chair, it's a really good question. We can definitely open the discussions in that space, I guess see where they go. Yeah.
Thanks for raising that, and thank you so much for the presentation. Really, really interesting, and as you can say, it's quite topical for councillors. So it'd be good to sort of keep on top of where this is heading. Paige, great presentation. Thank you very much. It was good. Thanks, team. And the next presentation is Public Transport Improvement Program for Greater Christchurch, our services. Giles will be leading this with Stuart, Sonia, Mark and Stephanie. Okay.
Who's running the check? I might get Sonia to run. All it is, it's no biggie, it's just pressing the button and I put the slide on, so it's all ready to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kia ora. How are you? Very good, thank you.
You loaded busy, don't we?
Yes. Can you see the beads of sweat?
Giles, I'll let you introduce your team, and I hear we'll be taking the presentation as read, and we'll go through the presentation and then we'll do the questions at the end. But Giles, I'll get you to introduce the team and start us off.
Just a reminder of who we have with us. We have Sonia, Mark and Stephanie here to give one of the regular updates on the work on the PT improvement plan, particularly focused on community engagement today. But I'll hand over to Sonia, I'm assuming, to start the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. So just in terms of the agenda, we're going to have a quick update from Mark on Route 1 and Route 5, so the investment case. quick update on the PT improvement program. We've got some really exciting things happening in that space, and it's just going to move really, really quickly. So we will be coming back to you to provide regular reviews and kind of updates, and there'll be decision points throughout that process. Steph's going to take you through where we are with the community engagement planning and delivery. Again, it's looking great. We've got some materials that are going out there. We're kind of really gearing up, and we're getting kind of really, really good feedback in that space. So again, we're really wanting to look at how we can support you, really aiming for that engagement date when we actually go out to consult with our communities in May and June. And we know that the community is really, really wanting this. We're expecting a lot of engagement. So I will hand over to Mark. Thank you. I'm going to skip through those.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll take the first few slides as read, and I will provide you an update on Route 1 and 5. And as you can see, we have a chart up here which is a bit bigger than that, and really wanted to offer a new perspective on how this Route 1 and 5 leads to eventually MRT.
Magic.
Yeah, exciting stuff. Steps, exactly, steps. So this is something I've developed based on my prior work before here. I've worked on the planning of MRT. We've got a forthcoming network review coming up, and we're working very closely with Christchurch City on their PT infrastructure business case as well. And the benefits of the stepped approach is we spread the costs over time, incremental steps, achievable steps, and we realise benefits in the near term rather than waiting 12 years. So we keep winning as we go. So we're chunking it by triennium, starting with 27 to 30. And we begin this process by completing the business case for the Route 1 and 5 frequency uplift, which we are looking to have finished this month. We're working closely with NZTA, who are co-funding this MAHI, and it's going really well. So all being well, we'll get some funding to do that. We are currently going after early funding possibilities. So on this graph here, we have the intervention of Route 1 and 5 shown in 2730. If we could get it funded this triennium, perhaps next financial year, then we'll be coming back for a different conversation on local funding share. So watch this space. We will go for as much as we can. We're also, as I said, we're supporting the work of CCC, which is complementary. We've had a workshop with them on their multi-criteria analysis, and making sure that although we're delivering infrastructure and operations separately, that is happening in a coordinated manner. Yep. Looking, yeah, I might just talk to the rest of this because it's a new concept. After securing the frequency uplift, we're then looking at when we might join together the northern and western parts of Route 1 and 5 to create that pre-MRT bus route. And then that creates opportunities for running larger vehicles. It would be more operationally efficient to do that. That's another key step on the journey, as is the spreading out of bus stops in partnership with CCC, and then the converging of a lot of local routes that use parts of the MRT corridor, but changing those into feeder routes through the network review. So I just wanted to convey this sense of strategy that we have moving towards MRT from a solid foundation in Route 1 and 5 frequency uplift. So let's move on. Cool. And where are we now with the network review? We've run a very competitive tender evaluation process for this work, which is going to form the basis of the long-term plan 2737. We have a really, really solid team on board, and we're going to work well as one team, amplifying our own internal capabilities. So this is a very exciting space. We're following a business case methodology, and we'll be working with NZTA to maximise outcomes and really gear this whole thing towards getting as much NZTA funding as we can. Another key element of this work is realising that we need more coverage in our PT system. That is very difficult to do, obviously, both financially and for other reasons. So we're looking at bringing in innovation, new ideas, alternative service models, so we can actually provide more services more cost efficiently. So that is also a big part of this MAHI. And we'll be looking to come to you before November with 3 network design options of varying cost to work with you on ahead of consulting with our communities in 2027. So that's me, and I'll hand back to Sonia.
Just wanted to provide a bit of context. Hopefully, most of Council are aware of the things that are going on in the background, particularly the bottom bullet. So you do have a presentation later today on the current GPS, but we are expecting the draft GPS, which is the government policy statement on land transport, in mid-May. That has the potential to fundamentally change the direction on public transport, as the last GPS did. Don't want to steal any thunder from Jesse and Amy for later today, but that's a very important document in terms of setting the tone for the public transport triennium, which runs to a different cycle than the local government triennium, one of our many challenges. That then leads obviously into the National Land Transport Fund, again, something that you're familiar with in terms of its extremely constrained nature, and depending on how much money is in that fund and how it's allocated across the activity classes will fundamentally impact on our ability to deliver improvements in conjunction with NZTA and the City Council. Obviously there's an election later this year, you might be aware of that. That also has the potential to require a further GPS to be drafted, depending on, and again, can fundamentally alter, even if it's the same colour, it could be a different composition and could alter the direction that we are working with. So these are all contextual. We work with what we know today. And then, as we talked about yesterday, and is very much in people's minds, the fuel situation creates a challenge for us, but also creates a massive opportunity in terms of public transport's role in keeping economies, societies and communities working and operating in an effective way. And the more that we can decarbonise that this service, then the less reliant we are on future oil spikes, etc. So just really wanted to put it in context of there are a number of things that could impact on what we are able to do despite council and the community's desires.
All right, kia ora. So just to come back, I guess, originally to one of the initial slides that we talked about around the key phases, just to give a sense of where we're at with community engagement right now. We're continuing to engage with our council partners to look at shared comms and engagement opportunities, and that's gone really well, actually. There's been a number of opportunities to go out into the community and talk about the network review in a really in an early way, and we would expect to continue to do that over time through the early engagement stage and through the consultation period. We are looking at a lot of outreach at the moment into the community through personal contact, through emails, through talking with people on the ground, through our council contacts. We're also looking at developing our stakeholder workshops at the moment. We'll talk a bit more about that later on. So the online survey engagement dates, we've revised them slightly just to let you know. So we're expecting those dates at the moment to be the 13th of May to the 24th of June. That still gives us 6 weeks out in the community, which is a pretty significant period of time for engagement, and allows us to really have boots on the ground when it comes to talking to the community and making sure that we are meeting people where they are. The other reason is that we really wanted to get the response from the community into the hands of Mark's team so that it can be considered as a really key part alongside all of those technical options when the 3 different options will be put forward for council to consider as part of the long-term plan. So those 3 options, they'll be really similar to the last long-term plan, where there are the 3 different options differentiated by scale and speed of improvement, sort of like a gold, silver and bronze type option. And in the last iteration, council put forward the most ambitious program as their preferred option, and when it came through from the community, supported that option, and that was the one that was endorsed for the previous long-term plan, so we'd expect it to be a similar process this time. So that March 27th date is actually the date of public consultation, but has yet to be confirmed in terms of the actual open period for the survey itself, and seeking a targeted rate attached to each option. Yep, next one. So just in terms of our overall approach with regards to engagement, we are really grounding the conversation with the community in neighbourhood stories that are based on what we've heard from feedback previously, and that draws on that meta-analysis that we talked to you about last time. We've divided the whole of the Greater Otatahi area into 8 key areas. So Waimakariri and Selwyn are one area each. And then the city area, the Christchurch city area is developed into 6 different areas based on the CCC ward boundaries, essentially, except for Spraydon. Spraydon is being put into the Hornby-Hallswell ward just based on the infrastructure and the network itself, the context of the network. Yeah, that's right. So we're focusing on really what makes a good public transport network for Greater Otatahi when we are talking to the community, and really grounding it in the principles from the Regional Public Transport Plan as the foundational document that talks about the methods for improving the network overall. We're really looking at developing a really strong campaign that grabs people's attention. We are looking at getting feedback from people who are users of public transport, but we're also really aiming to hear from people who are non-users or occasional users, and that's really important in terms of developing that campaign with a strong call to action. We are doing a range of targeted communications, and we're really looking to our key stakeholders to take an advocacy role and spread the word directly into their communities. So that's communities of interest or communities of location. Range of engagement methods as well that makes sure that we really do hear a diverse range of voices, and working on a really good survey and a survey design process to make sure that we hear from as many people as possible, but again, as well as diverse voices. So just in terms of the campaign, as I said, we're really looking to make sure that we hear from as many people as possible, but it's also really important that we hear from a wide range of people. So we are making sure that we have a really strong call to action in our campaign. It'll be really similar to what you might have seen in previous long-term plan campaigns. So you'd expect to see bus stops, bus backs, lots of social media, digital ads, things like that, community newspapers. Email is a really important channel for us. We have over 60,000 subscribers to the Metro newsletter, so that's a really key one. And we will be using social media channels, both the Environment Canterbury Facebook pages and the Metro Facebook pages, which drive really good engagement. And they're also really they're widely shared by our partners as well when we put posts. So essentially, we want people to know about the network review. We want a really strong call to action so that they'll have their say. That's the campaign. So in the past month or so, we've also done lots of updates to our reference groups. So we work alongside our accessibility reference group and our PT stakeholder reference group, who represent lots of different communities. We've done outreach via our TA partners to lots of different organisations. And as I said, we're getting lots of invitations to come out and speak to the community about the network review, and lots of early outreach to engage stakeholders in those key areas. Next one.
Sorry.
So I guess within this consultation also we have this, next one. Yeah. Oh, right, I'm in a different place. Survey design. So again, talking about the survey design, we are working with an academic advisor from Otago University who's helping us develop both the questionnaire and look at the methodology. She has over 20 years of experience working in research on transport and society, so she's been a really great asset to the process. So the survey design itself is non-probability based sample, so it's essentially self-selection. So what we need to be really clear about is the fact that when we hear back from the community, it's not necessarily a representation of the entire population, it's a representation of the people who have responded to the community, but it's also informs our methodologies for engagement and making sure that, again, we meet people where they are. So we've got a wide range of opportunities to interact with people and that we do that in ways that are useful for people. So we wouldn't look to just doing digital engagement, for example. We're looking boots on the ground, and you'll see that in some of our event planning later on. Yep. So we will have a questionnaire that is available online, and that's our sort of standard methodology, but we'll also have a paper survey. We would be looking to have a slightly shorter survey aimed at young people who we know are less inclined to fill out a really long survey. Community members can also give their verbal feedback through Metro Customer Services in a multiplicity of different ways. Targeted tactics specifically developed to reach people who are at risk of transport disadvantage, and by that we mean people who are identified under the LTMA as transport disadvantaged. So we're looking at older people, younger people, people with disabilities, people that don't have access to a car. And we've devised ways of making sure that we are reaching those people in appropriate ways. And we're also going to monitor responses. So we're also looking for a range of demographic information through this survey, and that's a really important component of this survey. We're really wanting to understand the responses and preferences of people from different community groups. So we'll be able to analyse the survey responses on a range of different demographic attributes. And we'll be able to monitor survey responses throughout the period so that if we find that we're not hearing from a particular group, we can pivot, and that's the benefit of having a longer consultation period as well. So we can really look to be quite specific about where we're targeting so that we get enough responses from certain groups of people. Okay, so within... I'm on the wrong. Mine's skipping about all over the place. I'll just go from this one. So within this consultation, we've also got this quite specific and targeted Route 44-135 change proposal. So this requires us to have a really specific set of tactics in order to make sure we hear from impacted people. The benefit of having this change proposal in the wider survey is that it's a really great case study in terms of really exemplifying the kinds of trade-offs that we might expect to have to consider when we're operating in an environment with really constrained resources. So this is a really great on-the-ground example of what people might have to consider. It does mean that we need to make sure that we hear specifically from those people who are impacted by the change proposal. So we'll be doing a specific targeted flyer and a mailbox drop to key impacted locations. We'll be having posters at each of the different shelters and in the bus stops. We'll be able to identify Metro card users who've used the services in the last 12 months, and we can send them a direct email. We'll be able to get out on the network. We can distribute flyers at the bus interchange, and also for the 135 hop on the bus or be at key locations to make sure people know that this change proposal is happening. Obviously, there's key stakeholders in the area that we've worked with in the past as well, and we will be reaching out to them directly, and councillors will also be aware of the information session to the Waitai Coastal Board that's scheduled for the 20th of April. That's a conversation specifically about the change proposal, and that will be led by Mark and other members of our team. Okay, so... stakeholder workshops. So these workshops are aimed at a really specific group of people. They are specifically aimed at organisations or community groups that we work with regularly, who've either interacted with us on matters of public transport directly through Metro Customer Services, through deputations or through consultations, and who represent wider communities that are impacted by or have a specific interest in public transport. There's a couple of objectives in us working with people in a workshop environment, and that's really about having an opportunity to explain people a little bit more about the entire process end to end of the network review, how it fits with the process of developing the 10-year improvement plan, how people can have their say. And we're really looking to have people support us and be advocates in this process. So it's an opportunity to have a conversation about how we can make sure that people who need to hear about the review hear about it through their channels, what information we can supply to them to make sure that they get it in the way they need. It's also an opportunity to really have a conversation about some of the basic planning principles and the context that we're operating in right now. It's an opportunity for people to ask lots of questions. And it also allows us to explore some of the things that are a bit harder to do in a survey. So it's an opportunity to get qualitative information about things like trade-offs, preferences, prioritising, and make sure that we understand really clearly what people's preferences are and the types of thinking that we need to consider when it comes to developing the network options. The next one. So lots of engagement events are being planned. So within each of those different 8 locations, we're looking at areas that we can pop up and have in-person stands. We've done that in previous engagements like the Regional Public Transport Plan, and they work really well. They're also really flexible, so we can pop up at we have a little kit and we just go in and we pop up, and various councillors around the table have accompanied us to many of those events in the past. So we are in the process of deciding, of figuring out what that looks like. It's going to be the middle of winter, so we also have to plan accordingly. So malls are sort of high on the list as places where lots of people are going to go. We need to be where people are. It's unlikely that people come to events, so it's really great to be able to be flexible and go to where people are and be able to change throughout the 6 weeks so that we can respond to things that are going really well at the time. So we will also look at various community events that are happening through the consultation period and be there if we can. The bus interchange also works really well for us. The Riccarton Hub works really well for us. We are doing a range of youth events. We work quite closely with the University of Canterbury where there's 30,000 students, so we'll have packages there. And we're working really closely with the Youth Ropu and various youth councils as well to help support youth-led advocacy in schools. So we're also looking at an ambassador program, and that's the heart of us being able to be really flexible and get out and cover lots of different locations and be able to talk to lots of different people flexibly. So we often find that when the consultation period is open, we get invited to lots of events. So we need lots of people to help support those opportunities so that we can be out there with people face to face. And again, we're working with our key stakeholders, so all those people in the public transport stakeholder reference group, to think about their communities and where we need to be and how we can support people getting that message out widely. So there's a project page, which is fantastic. There's currently a project page up on our consultation site, so you can feel free to go and let the community know about that. That's an opportunity for them just to see really at a high level what our intention is regarding the network review. And they can also sign up to the newsletter. So if they would like to be notified specifically of when the consultation goes live, if they pop their email address in there, we'll be able to let them know directly about the consultation and any updates through along the way. And that's, so I'm not sure if you have any questions.
Excellent, thank you. I've definitely got questions of councillors. I've got one question I just wrote down around the engagement and the stakeholders. Are you also engaging with business, though? So the Chamber of Commerce, the Central City Business Association, in those?
I think we've got one of the business associations, and that's something that I think we need to add to our list. Yep. And so again, if you have specific suggestions,
I think because from when I speak to businesses, one of the hurdles is fringe benefit tax on them providing services for PT, or providing PT for their staff. And I know that there is now a service that has been provided in Wellington. I think it's a third-party service. So if we can try and feed that into this somehow to start an education program to say that now we've got services and we could even integrate. Giles, have you even had a look at that further?
So we passed that on to Jo, our Chief People Officer, and she's actively investigating that in terms of our staff, but that would then potentially roll out wider. Yeah,
because if we can do this simultaneously. There's a whole market there. The other one, I've got lots of people, so I'm going to come to Joe first as the core service lead, and then I've got Campbell, Lamont, Moody, Faulkner, Mackay, and now Gerard. But I've got one other question there in the governance steps. Sorry, not in the governance steps, but when you're coming back to us in November, I'll get you, Davis as well. Where are the governance steps in this? So there's a lot of interest from us as politicians, I suppose, from our community regarding public transport all of the time, and so we're always getting people wanting to talk to us about that. So I just want to make sure that we've got very clear governance steps where we can make either decisions or have input so that we're able to both communicate with our community and then feed that back.
Yeah, thank you. Really good question. So essentially we'll be using the long-term plan process. So we'll kind of kick into that process as we work through. And obviously you've had some pre-meetings around that as well. So that'll be the key process that we use in order to kind of have those governance decisions.
Okay, I'll think about that. I'll come to you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, looking forward to the engagement in the campaign. Obviously, we had a great campaign last year as well. So, yeah, I've got a few questions. And yeah, when you said about the metadata, that's all that stuff that we've collected in the last few years as well, kind of feeding in. Yeah, nice. So we had PT Futures, it's been renamed, and so, but ultimately the essence is the same. So we've rolled out. I think council kind of understands quite well the core service uplift. We get that, like the 1 and the 5, but the rest of network, the periphery stuff. This is this review now, right? So we're going to gather all that information, all that data from the community. It's going to be merged with all the other data that we've collected, and then it'll go out as a draft LTP, and there'll be options around what the appetite is from council, and then there'll be another layer of community engagement on the options. Okay, sweet. I'm just trying to get my non-technical mind through this. And I guess the only question I've got is the reference group still meeting?
Yes, they do. Usually about quarterly. So we had a meeting last month.
And in terms of, because the other term we were talking about was like an optimization program. So that's this as well.
So the optimization program is a continuous program that we do. So we're looking to continuously look at how we can optimize and make better use of existing resources. This one here with Route 44 and 135, we've put that into this consultation because it's a really good example of what optimization would look like. Going forward, we would obviously go and consult on any changes we look to put through, and that would be a separate process. But we've used it here in this process, one, because it joins the consultation together and doesn't confuse people, but it also shows how we're trying to make kind of smaller changes to improve our network as well, not just the big, large 10-year improvement program. So it's kind of, when we're talking to the communities and people, we'll kind of explain the difference there. But optimization is an ongoing, we've got existing budgets, and that's just an ongoing focus for us.
Right, so there will be more kind of optimization decisions coming to council between all of this. And then, yeah, my kind of main comment I'd make just over my time here is, a real kind of focus on the west, on those growing suburbs, I think would be really awesome around Halswell, around Hornby, if you've grouped Spraydon in there.
Yoldhurst, Belfast, they're all growing.
Yeah, and it's, we've had a good situation out east, had a good development out there, so I think...
West Melton.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I'll just make a quick comment on that. Essentially, we're doing a current state review. We've got our consultants and our team working on that. So that's looking at land use, existing changes and future proposed changes. So then we can kind of map our existing network, and that'll really give us a clear picture. We talked earlier around kind of, we put a picture up where you can see gaps. This will give us kind of more evidence around what that looks like. And then the idea is that your 10-year improvement program helps kind of plug those gaps. So it really is integrating transport planning and land use. That is kind of the critical.
I've got Councillor Campbell next. I've just got one question I forgot to ask that I wanted to, and it kind of comes off the back of what you were saying, Joe, around the Route 1 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be done this month to get that data to NZTA? Because that's quite urgent, and there are opportunities right now for us to present that and to fight for that piece of money, if there's money available.
Yes.
So that will be done this month.
Yes.
Has the initial data been sent to NZTA on the evidence, even though that the full picture hasn't been done? Because right now we are asking questions and there are conversations happening.
Yeah, so we've provided initial evidence and information, but we have to go through a business case process first, and we need to internally approve that before we have those conversations with NZTA. So we need to make sure that we're really comfortable with where the data and evidence is landing. But we have had those high-level conversations, and I would like to take the opportunity to kind of thank Council for the advocacy around this. So, you know, it's really... we're kind of doing everything we can to secure this improvement that we know we desperately need for our communities. And I think kind of everybody's on board that this is a good thing to do.
Cool. We'll keep fighting on that one, Giles. We'll get this one done soon, I hope. Councillor Campbell.
Great work on routes 1 and 5. And my first question actually relates to that, going back to your little staged approach diagram, and talking about how you're aiming to integrate the western part of Route 5 and the northern part of Route 1 for the MRT. You know what I'm gonna ask next, don't you? Given the perception in many quarters that the east is always neglected, what does that integration mean for the eastern part of Route 5 and the southern part of Route 1? Is there any disadvantage to those parts of the route in this approach that you're taking?
So we haven't actually got to the stage of planning that yet. Both of those sections are obviously part of the frequency uplift to turn up and go. So at this point, we haven't got any reason to want to change that. So I guess that is a work in progress, and we'll keep you updated as it progresses.
So my second question, and you probably know where I'm going to go with this too, about engagement, and going back to our last council meeting and the Aranui decision. I saw in the list that you sent out that there was Pam Williams was on that consultation list. So I want to be, given also that I've sent through another possibility for engagement, which I haven't received a response to on that, I just want to be sure in my own mind that there is priority given to the Aranui engagement separate from this, and that it's not seen just as part of this, because I know that our direction was for that to go ahead. I understand that it fits in with this, but I just want to be clear that there is some engagement going on as well as this.
Yes, there's some really great engagement happening on that front. So that's actually a separate piece of work because it needs to happen really quickly. So we've had some conversations with some community members already about what the best approach is. We understand that it's face-to-face. There's a plan. We've identified some key stakeholders. We've had some recommendations about the best places to go and undertake that piece of work. So it's all in hand. And then we want to make sure as well that that community gets an opportunity through the network review to have their say as well. So we're building opportunities for both pieces of work to happen. So that first piece of work to happen really quickly, and the other piece to make sure that they have some input into the longer term planning.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd kind of like to be kept informed of that, because I also have good social media links into that community, so I can help spread the word of whatever you're doing.
That would be amazing.
Councillor Lamont.
Perfectly dovetailing on Councillor Campbell's question and comments. Mine's a comment that will turn into a question because I'm a good human. The in comms, and I noticed we have our wonderful comms person sitting at the back, so hopefully her ears are pricking up right about now. So it'd be really helpful for councillors to have a suite of engagement digital assets that everyone can put on their channels. Some of us are really amazing at the socials, and some of us are slightly crap. Sorry to say crap, but be really good to have something in a coordinated way. We could sort of meld it to suit councillor areas. We all have big reach if we choose to do that, and we should. I'm constantly asked about public transport. It would be great to put stuff out there. Not so good at writing it myself, so.
No problem. That's definitely part of the plan for sure. So we'll have a package of materials that you can share, and quite often we always have a package of social media assets that can be shared by our stakeholders as well. So we can just do iterations for you. Yeah.
Councillor Moody.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously a range of levels of understanding of this subject material, and mine's still pretty basic. I mean, I'm googling as I go. You know, what is Route 1? What is Route 5? You know, what is Route 34? If you could just have the names in there, I suspect I'm not the only person that who won't know every route by heart. And what is, I've heard a few of these briefings, and yeah, I look forward to when we do the public consultation stuff, because I can read that and get my head around it. But at the moment, I'm not clear on the basics. What is meant by uplift? I can see in the picture here, sort of stop consolidation and to the less stops, or does it mean more buses, or just some of the very simple stuff? Perhaps that's because I want to understand and champion it too.
Thank you. Good comments to take on. Cool.
Can I just, as we've done in other areas, and thinking of the finance drop-in sessions, we could organise a public transport, come in and ask there's no such thing as a daft question. If you don't, it's great, Route 1, where does it go? If you don't know, then we should be including it, but how do we help to create that level of understanding so that councillors can go out and advocate for what we're trying to do here. So
Councillor Faulkner.
Sorry, just a quick comment. We've made sure in the consultation material, because we just talk about routes like everybody knows what they are, we've made sure it includes the name. So essentially it's the origin and destination. And for most people, then they know kind of where they sit. They know that they get the Route 80, but we have made sure that we've kind of put the name to it as well, because, yeah, it can get confusing.
John.
Thank you for that. I was just looking at the page 14, where the key messages and the survey options and social media, etc. And I wondered about the use of technology to get survey results. And you've got bus stops and bus backs, but is there a possibility to have a QR code or something as the people get on the bus?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, we usually provide a short URL and a QR code. We put those on the posters. We have DL flyers. We've found that DL flyers work really, really well because people can take them away. They can either do them on the spot using their phone with a QR code, or they can take it home and put it on the fridge, or use that as reference later on. That's really works well for us.
Councillor, who have I got here? I'm going to go Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I've got three questions. One is about this one, and the double buses. Great initiative. Just wondering if we are working with Christchurch City Council urban designers about what your routes may look like and how we plan ahead for the trees and getting around the city. So that's one question. And the rest are on the... Okay, cool.
Yeah, essentially we're working really, really closely because obviously this is a joint programme that we're all working towards, working really closely with Christchurch City Council. Then you could look to Waimakariri and Selwyn on essentially what's the supporting infrastructure we need. So as we kind of look for our improvement programme, we're all working together to make sure that we kind of dovetail service improvements and infrastructure. And so the ability for double deckers to use a route is key to that one.
Use your button, Sue.
Communication, and one is the just following up with the idea of working with businesses, but also the major employers like health, especially hospitals. And yeah, so that one, yeah.
Yes, we do work quite closely with Te Whatu Ora already, and we've been in touch with them about spreading the word. So we have a reference group that we work with, and also various other healthy commute groups. So we're quite in touch with a diverse range of people within Te Whatu Ora, and they've helped us get in contact with some of the PHOs. They're a key part of of the conversations that we're happening. They're also really key to getting out to communities through GPs and things like that, and helping us get to people, various seniors, etc., that use those facilities. Yeah.
Excellent. So my last question is around what we can do. I'm for Christchurch West, so I knocked on 1,000 doors, and it was sort of like a lot of those were migrants, and in a huge range of society. And I've actually got on my had a spreadsheet, and I put down notes about what people were interested in, and so. With that, a lot of people were interested, of course, in transport, and I'm just wondering if I could go back to those people with my pamphlet and say, this is what we're doing, have you got any comment or that sort of thing? Yeah, I'd love to be able to go back and door knock on those doors.
Yes, absolutely. That'd be great. That would be that's the kind of thing that recruits people to the survey and makes sure that we get people to have their say. So we can provide you with. So we'll provide a package for everybody that's got FAQs, a glossary of all the terms, back pocket notes of things that you might get asked. We'll give you the flyers and post whatever else. But the flyers are really, really great to door knock with, because you can leave people with something so that they've got it there, and it's really easy for them to follow up later on and with a short URL and the QR code. So that would be amazing.
Sarah's our Jimmy Chen from our from City Council was door knocked on everybody's doors all the time. It was great. One more question.
And this is actually for a comms person. If I am to go out door knocking, I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity where I could also have something on the bird flu at the same time for this, and any other relevant item that could be discussed at the time. So just something to think about.
You can pick up anything you want, and you are the boss of. I skipped Councillor Mackay, so we'll better. Councillor Mackay. I read my list the wrong way around. And you're next, Councillor.
Actually, I think there's a bit of bias going on by our chair here. But through you, Chair, to the staff, look, thank you very much for the presentation, and particularly Steph for your comms plan. I just sit here as a governor, and I am concerned that we are focusing on bus users and people that potentially want to use buses or get one into their area. Can we perhaps look at touching on the ratepayers a little bit more? They're generally the bill payers here. And perhaps look at the opportunities for sending flyers out with the rates demands that might go out close to or within that period of time. Because I think it's important as governor sitting here, I've sat through a lot of these, and we deliberate, and numbers can influence us if we're not hearing from a wide perspective of our community. So
I think we can look at it. I think we might. I don't know if we've got the timing right for this one. But we can check into it. But we are also looking at doing specific flyer drops to different portions of the community. So I think we've allowed for something like 23,000 drops of flyers to specific areas that we know are targeted based on deprivation, proximity to the network, and lack of proximity to the network, car ownership and things like that. So that's one of the things that our advisor has given us some information on to make sure that we do get to people. That's definitely in the plan, so we can have a look at the rates flyers and see what's possible.
Can I just to clarify, I mean, I will draw on my Waimakariri district, and certainly those around the Kaipoi area, the community board present to us just about every year on this. While they want a service, there is concern about the impacts on the individual rates. So just making sure that we actually get that balanced perspective.
Comment that I completely understand the question, and I think it's a really good point. Also, there will be the opportunity through the LTP consultation where we will clearly be targeting all of the community, including all ratepayers and bus users or potential users.
And just quickly to add, we'll also look to follow the same process we did last time, where we talk about what the rates impact is, provide examples for certain, like different areas, so rural, Waimakariri, Selwyn, Christchurch City Council. So we'll kind of run the same process that we did last time through the LTP, which was incredibly successful.
Is there more on the options once they've been developed, or is that in the development of the wider thinking, which I think Councillor Mackay's trying to say the broader people? Is it?
Yeah, but I think what I'm hearing is that staff are suggesting, well, we've really actually got two bites of the cherry here. So, but I think that we need to do it at both places.
Councillor Davis.
It's tricky, the engagement piece, isn't it? Because I'm thinking the quality of this really relies on the quality of the engagement. And how do we get people who don't ride the bus? And in the States, we did, it's a clipboard method. You just have a really short 3 questions. If you had 3 questions, what would they be? And then if we had them, because I'm constantly in the community and I Residents Association chair, we could get a lot of information if we had 3 good questions. And it would be, because when you put a flyer in a letterbox, it doesn't always translate, and it's particularly if your English is just second language. I mean, but 3 questions, I don't know if we can do that.
We do have an allowance for a shorter survey, so that's the intention of that one, is to make it short and sharp. So at a minimum, we get that basic level of information. And one of the ways that we're trying to make sure that we get feedback from people who don't use the bus is those pop-ups and events. So we're trying to be where people are, and that's where people are who may or may not necessarily use the bus. So we're obviously going to oversample people that take the bus just by the nature of it. But we are also really aware that in the development of the campaign, we're making sure that it's appropriate for people that people know we want them to respond to us, whether they use the bus or not, because we're looking at a 10-year plan. And so that's also the thinking behind the ambassador program as well. So we're really going out to where people are, and that's the opportunity to target people who may not necessarily be in those areas where they're taking the bus at the time. So really out in key public places where there are lots of people.
I've got a great guerrilla marketing campaign coming on, a QR code with a "take the bus, don't pay this parking fee," right on all of the parking meters all across the city. I think it would go great. So there you go. Like, do some innovative naughty things like that. We'll get ourselves in trouble, but we'll get the people that are not using public transport. Thanks, team. I really appreciate what you've brought to us. I've just got one other engagement piece, and it's always often forgotten, as the city mission in those type of communities. Are you making sure you're engaging them?
They're a part of our stakeholder reference group.
Excellent. So, no, they're often one of the forgotten. So, thank you again. Really appreciate the update. Look forward to more updates on that as you get further. Route 1 and 5 this month. We're making it happen. Excellent. We're looking forward to keeping that one going. The next briefing is Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan. We've got Amy Ellison, Jessie Burgess and Claire. We'll be taking charge in that one. Amy? This is to brief councillors on the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan, including council's role, responsibilities in relation to the plan. how would you like to run through the presentation, then questions at the end? Excellent. Okay, Amy, over to you to introduce your team.
Morena councillors and tēnā koutou katoa to those who are watching on the live stream. Kei te rangatira rautaki aho I mahi ana ko Amy Allison aho. So greetings everyone, I am Amy Allison, I'm the Strategy and Planning Director here, and we are continuing our series on all things strategy and planning, and as I said yesterday, we have been working through what our formal partnerships and fora are, and then once that is clear and we have a common understanding or a refresh, then working through what some of those specific pieces of work are. So councillors and also those interested parties have the best visibility. So the team will just run you through the Regional Land Transport Plan project update, but also brief you on what the Regional Land Transport Committee is and where it fits in the puzzle. So over to you.
Kia ora, councillors. Called Jesse Burgess Tokuingoa. I'm the Senior Strategy Manager here at Environment Canterbury Regional Council. We'll just take you through today, as Amy said, the Regional Land Transport Plan and the committee. I'd just like to introduce Claire Patterson, Principal Strategy Advisor in my team, who's leading the Regional Land Transport Plan development. So you'll see us up here briefing you as we go through the course of this year as well. So as Amy said, the purpose is today to brief you on the Land Transport Plan, which is overseen by the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee, which is a delegated committee of the council. We'll take you through some details on that later. As Amy said, this is a planned series of council briefings. We briefed you yesterday on the Canterbury Climate Partnership Plan and also the Canterbury Regional Energy Workstream. Those workstreams sit under the mayoral forum. The Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan development is a role within this council and the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee. And after this briefing, after lunch, we've also got the briefing on the government policy statement on land transport. This slide shows where the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan fits within the broader partnership forum and forum's key work streams. The South Island RTC Chairs Group work program is also part of this thinking. The Chair and Councillor Davies sit on the South Island RTC Chairs Group, which is having their first meeting of the Triennium on Monday. That is a collection of all the Regional Transport Committee chairs that come to talk about South Island-wide issues as well, which we touched on at the initial briefing of this series. So without any... over the next slide, sorry. So today's briefing will cover off with you what is a Regional Land Transport Plan, why it's important, the roles and responsibilities of both the committee and this council, and also an update on how the project is progressing, which commenced last year, and we've been working with the Regional Transport Committee up until now. So this is the first opportunity we've had to give you a more comprehensive update on this process and where to from here. So I'll hand over to Claire. She'll take you through the next series of slides, which relates to the transport plan and the committee. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, ko Claire Patterson tōku ingoa, ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. In Canterbury, a Regional Land Transport Plan is a collective impact document. So it's how 12 organisations collaborate to collectively invest. It's not, as the name suggests, a transport planning process, because each organisation that's involved has transport planners that do their own transport planning. And so it's about collectively coming together to get synergy, really. And it aims to achieve transport outcomes in the region through any activity that is any of the approved organisations undertake. It must contribute to the Land Transport Management Act. So that means an effective and efficient safe land transport system, consistency with the government policy statement on land transport, but also integrating and taking into account energy strategies, police activities, the Resource Management Act. Currently, that's what it says, RMA framework, or whatever will replace that system. So it's environment, energy, social, kind of integrated planning. It's quite prescriptive in the Act as to what the plan must contain. So it must contain objectives, policies, measures, priorities for the next 10 years towards a 30-year view. So it's a very long-term document. I call it the karere because it's a high-flying bird, but it does some pretty aerial fighting at the same time. It's not down in the detail. And it includes financial forecasts from all sources of funding. So we generally talk about it in three ways: Crown funding, national funding, and local share. So local share could be any kind of funding or financing mechanism that any of the organisations around the table might be able to pull. And we also note significant private or philanthropic investment as part of the context. So, for example, freight hubs, there's often a lot of private investment in freight hubs. Community vehicle trusts, there's a lot of philanthropic money goes into community-led transport initiatives. And that's what makes transport outcomes in the region work together as a whole. It's important because it's evidence-based integrated investment planning, really, and that's pretty important. It's billions of dollars in the 10-year period that is prioritised. It's not a compilation exercise where it's just cut and paste, and it enables agreed selection and prioritisation, which is the intention of the Land Transport Management Act. And there's ongoing work to better and improve alignment with the Act over time. So into roles and responsibilities for the committees. So it's a statutory committee, and the membership is mayors, chair of the regional council, and a representative as a deputy who you've already appointed, and a representative from NZTA, and the organisations are the councils in the region, NZTA, and Department of Conservation as well. Other organisations could be added by order of council by the Governor-General. So Kiwi Rail has been added in some circumstances, or it's in the Act. That hasn't occurred for Canterbury. Other roles can be appointed by the committee as advisory, but they're non-voting. I've spoken to that a little bit earlier. And so what we provide is strategy and policy expertise to the Regional Transport Committee and the Canterbury Transport Officers Group, which is transport staff. So your public transport people like Mark and who you see regularly, they will come along to the meetings, just like all the other councils will have people who come along to those meetings who they're familiar with. And so that's the public transport expertise. And then we have you guys have the role to approve the RLTP after it's been agreed to by that committee. So that will be mid next year. I think I've got a slide about timeframes. It's really delegated to the committee. So if you approve, you're kind of approving that they have done it. The transport outcomes sit with that committee. It's not you approving the transport outcomes. And then it's sent for compilation. NZTA then does the compilation work nationwide.
Could I just add to that? This has been a sticking point, I guess, over the last few RLTPs, and councillors around the table that are familiar with that process, where we've brought the draft RLTP or the approved RLTP by the committee back to the council to adopt. So we wear two hats, essentially, is what Claire's saying. We are the planning team that's pulling together the document, working with the committee to get that approved and then recommended back to our council for approval or adoption. And we also wear the hat of a public transport authority. So that's the opportunity where we, as a PTA, a public transport authority, can give our advice through our deputy chair and chair on the committee to feed into the process and then represent our regional council views around the table. It's wearing those two hats and just keeping that separation, between the two different roles. So we wear a PTA hat, but also development and compilation of the plan itself to bring through. So I just wanted to make that point to you.
Well, yes, so the public transport work program still is your purview, and you still have your long-term plan conversations, and you then can bring variations to the staff generally, bring variations to the Regional Transport Committee if there's anything new that you're doing or materially and significantly different. But it is because of where the document kind of sits in the what I call the meso layer in the system. It's a pretty high bar. And so it would kind of be like, oh, we're not going to try and improve public transport in Greater Christchurch. That's something that would be like, oh, hold on, that could have region-wide, like, I don't need to tell you how bad that would be. You've just been talking about doing it. So that's the kind of thing that would then go up to the committee for a variation. But I mean, I don't think we've had any variations for PT in the last 6 years to the RTC. I think we've had 2 or 3 variations.
The challenge,
pretty high level document.
The challenge we've had with variations over the journey has been more where the councils have the timing with LTP budgets and the RLTP is that they have a program of work of investment that is largely landed but not quite landed. The timing of the RLTP LTP process doesn't quite align. So when councils have their program landed and then they need to update the RLTP after that, we may see a variation, but it just depends on the significance of that variation or that change as to whether a variation is actually required. So part of this process, we develop a significance policy, which has a level of significance, particularly around investment, that will drive whether a variation is required or not in the future.
Yeah, and it's quite in Canterbury. It's quite a strong delegated approach for the organisations. So on to the project progress. So this might cover a few things I might have said before, but this is every 6 years. It's a full refresh, and then in the 3-year there's a review. So we're in the refresh part at the moment. Last time, 2024, was a review. The refresh in 2021, the strategic front end was being written during lockdown and there was no future scenarios included. So it's actually been more than a decade, about 12 years since there's been future scenarios work done. And so that's where we've put a lot of time and effort over the last 6 months to create that. So this is where we are in the project at the moment, just coming out of strategy development and heading into program development. And this is where the committee is at. So they've had vision workshops, priorities workshops. They've endorsed the strategic framework. In May, there'll be an affordability workshop, and hopefully and then into sort of the work program prioritisation process. So these, from our futures work, these were the 7 critical uncertainties facing transport that were identified. The energy and geopolitical shift, which some of that is kind of being realised. The governance and funding systems are changing, particularly revenue generation in the transport system. Long-term land use uncertainty, societal uncertainty, uncertainty around the hazards and when they will and won't occur, or we know it's more hazardous. The levels of service expectations from committees for infrastructure, and particularly with ageing infrastructure, and then also the technology shift, including the impact of AI on work and education and how that might shift travel patterns. So this is all largely uncertain. And then we framed in 5 plausible future scenarios. When I say we, this was the transport staff from across the 12 organisations. We also invited ICA, CDM, Te Whatu Ora. So we had lots of staff from across government and councils creating this. And so there were 2 transformational scenarios. One is up and away, where aerial movement kind of takes off. So that's your aerospace, drones, eVTOLs. So that's your vertical landing and takeoff. If that
That's the Jetsons. Should just be the Jetsons.
yeah.
Just put in context when Claire's talking about this is quite
30 years.
The scenario of up and away is quite an out there type scenario versus the yesterday's mode tomorrow right down into a doom and gloom. So just put that in context. When we're talking about this is quite a expansive of our thought process to get into this space and really think like what the future could look like in 30 years. But sorry, I'll just carry on.
Yeah, and then Spiderweb, which is a more familiar land transport based future. The fast follower, which is kind of taking from now but some improvement on that. Following the world, which is sort of a status quo. And then yesterday's mode tomorrow, which is quite a collapse and decline type scenario, which is plausible because of some of those uncertainties. So this is kind of an example of this kind of came out of this futures work, and at this the red is kind of where you're at a point in time. So it's less like one column is your one certain future, and it's more like the future is dynamic and we're shifting and moving as these uncertainties shift and move over time.
I see nobody circled the Jetsons. Sorry.
So the it is just 30 years is very uncertain at the moment. So yeah, it's kind of like either from 1 million possibilities to 34 billion possibilities in futures at the moment from that one framework. But the environment and communities that we have here could support a transformational 30-year view. The main issue at the moment is that it would be multi-billion-dollar investment required to do that transformation over that time frame, and we just do not have the assurance from central government in terms of both investment in transport and investment in energy infrastructure. So that is something when we're looking at how this intersects with energy strategies. Transport energy infrastructure shift is a critical part. That is not in scope for the RLTP. It's just what's in the sphere of control of the approved organisations and their transport spend.
Can I just add there as well? I think we briefed this yesterday on the importance of an energy strategy and roadmap for achieving these integrated outcomes across a range of different areas. So thinking about the transport space, if we are looking to decarbonise and move towards a more electrified system of transport, having an energy network and infrastructure that supports that is of critical importance. So you just start to see the links between the different work programs, as I said on that first couple of slides. All of this is integrated across the board. So how we actually think about this in a holistic context.
So the committee has a statutory duty to consider affordability of its strategic objectives. And so the committee endorsed with some amendments that will be coming back in May a fast follower approach. So maintaining existing network infrastructure and services, staging improvements, and then but still being open to change and innovation where it's kind of proven and it's going to stack up. So it's not risky, high risk innovation, because a lot of that is dependent on that energy supply. And so these were the amendments that they sought. So still have a mass rapid transit development remaining visible, even if it's just a lot of planning work at the moment. Resilience target, economic development and growth being reflected in the objectives, and also looking at there was a proposed investment priority around access to Māori land, and where would is that the right place for it to sit in the framework as an emergent strategic issue that doesn't have a large program of work developed underneath it. So we will be taking that back to those amendments and doing that work and coming back to the committee in May. And then into program development, the guidance from the committee was to keep the same level of autonomy for the councils and the government agencies, but to seek greater assurance around delivery, considering the amount of money that's being overseen. And so that guidance will inform the significance policy, which is when variations are required, and the performance monitoring framework that will be provided in May. And they also provided us some guidance to support with activity prioritisation. And so maintaining the network and resilience were almost inseparable in that workshop. Followed by economic development and growth, and then innovation and emissions reduction. So that's been informing our work, and what we will take to them in May is the amended strategic framework, the weightings for the prioritisation, the significance policy, and the monitoring framework, which will then have some, not just the traditional kind of outcomes indicators that's been provided, but also some key milestones and deliverables. And then we've also got the committee workshop where, which will be like a trade-offs type workshop at a very high level, still designing what that will look like, and which will give us a steer on what the work program may look like when that goes back in September. And it's just unfortunate that that workshop might be on budget day, where there might be some announcements that would be really useful to know. So, yeah, just kind of holding that intention, and we're keeping an eye on it and continuing to work with the ministry. They're quite good at giving us a steer on risk of rework. Yeah.
Can I just make a point on that slide? The words affordable and feasible are critical to the conversation we're having around transport at the moment, and we're in a funding constrained environment, as you've just heard. We'll talk about that more in the GPS discussion after lunch as well. But the affordable and feasible program is what we are required under the Act to deliver. The spend of what we would like to do, I think, outweighs is well beyond what is actually affordable by the National Land Transport Fund, and that fund is shrinking. The available funding is becoming challenging, so we need to look at what other opportunities are there beyond traditional funding streams to enable the improvements and changes that we need to see. But if you think of anything, affordable and feasible is really where we need to be at, and it reflects the current environment around rates capping and other things as well. So,
well, I've got a lot to say about that. Can I say something about that before you go on to the next slide? And I'm breaking my rule about going through this, but you've said this. My number one focus right now is the VKT versus the actual money that we get down here for the South Island. The VKT is the measure that they use for how much tax goes into the system, which is the vehicle kilometre travelled, and that's your road user charges and your petrol tax. The South Island gets 50% of what it puts in. And so when you're talking about feasible and affordable, there's a lot that's feasible here in the South Island. And when we say it's affordable, it's actually it's an artificial ceiling that we've got. In my opinion, it's an artificial ceiling. If we actually were getting the amount of money that we were putting into this system, we would probably be able to do a heck of a lot more, and our PT system would go well. We'll be able to do those rural roads, and from the rural economy point of view, I'm worried about that. All of those hundreds of bridges that are at the end of their life that are coming up to renewal, these are basic things that we need, and that is the number one focus from my point of view, is that advocacy, and I've got it written down everywhere, has been in the room to advocate before the decisions or as the decisions have been made. So if we can find those ways of where we can be at those right times, Joe and myself and anybody really, to be saying this, because that is the number one problem that we have with all of this conversation, is we've got so much that we want to do and it's feasible, but it's affordable and it's an artificial cap because of the money's going to the North Island. It makes me wild, and we've got to stop it. We've got to actually turn this around.
We do have a slide on that in the GPS briefing coming up, so
I won't be here. So I'm
conversation
getting
a
it
bit
out
further as
now.
well.
Councillor Lamont will be chairing that one.
Absolutely. So happy to take further questions on that as part of the discussion as well.
It makes me wild when we're talking about affordability, and it's not affordability in terms of the money that we're putting in. I will come to the questions at the end if that's okay. It's the difference of what we're not having here. Anyway, sorry.
Just on this next slide, just outlining here where, as we've done with the previous briefings yesterday, around the connections between this work and things like spatial planning, which transport is obviously a critical layer within that discussion. This work supports a more coordinated regional approach to transport outcomes. There are interdependencies. We've talked obviously about PT, but energy, resilience, air quality, the benefits associated with air quality improvements from particularly active modes and public transport mode shift, emissions reduction, the opportunities around housing, business growth, economic growth, etc. So lots of interdependencies between the transport investment that we do here and all the other work that we do. And Council, as we just noted here as well, and Claire mentioned at the start, you'll be asked to approve the draft Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan around June next year.
Yep.
I think we might have one last slide. Again, just reiterating where we're at in the process. We'll talk about the government policy statement on land transport after lunch, and next briefings after that around the spatial plan, transport plan and rail later in April. And I think that's it. We've got some links there to the transport pages, which I'll just do a bit of a prompt for, because there's a lot of information on our Environment Canterbury website around the regional transport work that we do. So if any of the councillors are looking for other information, this is a great source of information that we've kept up to date over the last couple of years.
Excellent. Plenty of time for questions. I've got you written down. I'll come to Councillor Davies first as the core service lead for public transport.
So just in terms of MRT, so maybe it would be good for like new councillors to understand how that was in our plan, and then it kind of slipped out of the national plan. So I'm just wondering its status now, but we're going to attempt to put it into this plan, but just as a planning sum, not as an implementation sum.
So what our process is that we compile. So it would be up to the Public Transport Authority aspect to go, MRT is part of what we need proposed into this. So, and then the strategic framework that's created is quite high level. And because it sits above the RPTP, which then has more detail, we tend to just talk public transport and then let public transport define what those public transport products and services are that are delivered. So traditionally, we've just said public transport. So if we say develop public transport in Greater Christchurch as a region kind of shaping strategic, then we don't kind of specify whether it's rail or light rail or buses or community vehicle trust, because that's a PTA. So, but we will mention mass rapid transit in that strategic framework because it's such a big part, region shaping part.
To your, well, I was going to add to that as well, Councillor Davis, through your chair. The mass rapid transit, so we're doing at the moment the PT Futures investment work that we've just talked about, the optimisation of the network discussions that we've just been having. Mass rapid transit, we're in the process of developing the work for the designation and the business case to invest in that. So the work that we're doing at the moment, and which will be incorporated in the LTPs for the councils and into the RLTP, is the investment work to do that planning work. The actual implementation, so bringing onto the network a mass rapid transit investment, is a latter cost into the LTPs and potentially beyond the 10-year period that we're talking about. And that was what was envisaged as part of the broader PT Futures program. We invest in the core routes, we invest in the rest of the network, and then we invest in developing the MRT. But MRT, as part of the business case, was to do the planning work while we're investing in PT core routes and rest of network, and then get the designation, have the business case ready to go so that we can then get the funding to do the actual on-the-ground MRT system. So that's just the timings of that is what Claire was talking about is in the program of the plan itself over the next 10 years. It might be that it's year 11 or year 12, if you like. So the next RLTP after this one might be the one where we actually start to see that level of investment coming in. But given the scale of that investment as well, this is why, as the Chair was saying, around the GPS, and we'll talk about that in the next briefing, we did previously ask for PT Futures and MRT to be recognised in the GPS on land transport. Auckland and Wellington have received recognition for the programs up there, but we didn't. And that's something...
GPS didn't even mention this Christchurch.
Exactly.
Full
so
stop.
This is something that we're very keen to advocate for and have advocated for ever since the GPS was released and prior to that as well. So it's a real critical point for us.
And this is where we need your help to get us in the rooms to be advocating for these things before the decisions are made and as the decisions are made. So they're front of mind of both ministers, ministries and whatnot. You know, from a political advocacy point of view, we need to be in those rooms and we need your help to get us in those rooms, especially Joe, myself and anybody else who's in these committees and anybody else who wants to be in those rooms as well.
And as staff, we are also having those conversations with our colleagues in different parts of government as well to recognise the opportunities in Greater Christchurch, particularly with the investment in public transport and what the economic growth opportunities that come with that as well, building off the investment that we've already made in our wonderful city here in Christchurch. And the complementary MRT system is a city shaping initiative under the spatial plan. So how do we build off that investment, actually deliver that MRT system for our communities? But it's going to require huge investment from government partnership, but also looking outside of the normal funding streams of like the National Land Transport Fund. How do we look at public-private partnerships and other opportunities as well? Because there are other opportunities to look at that here.
And we just accept the timings and costings provided to us by each organisation as well. So we don't generate the timings and costings, even though they're reflected in the plan. We prioritise towards outcomes, but the planning isn't what's done by me.
We'll bring back additional information to council as we go along as part of the priority. I'm intending to keep the council involved in this process, so you're not just getting a plan at the end to adopt and you don't know what it's all about. That was a learning from the previous iterations of this. So I'm very keen to keep council informed, wearing both we're developing the plan hat, but also the PTA, Public Transport Authority, inputs into. So with Giles and with Stuart and Sonia and the team, we'll work on that side as well, feeding in. We'll also keep you abreast of where things are at as plan development progresses.
We've already had, after the briefings yesterday, Jessie and I have already had conversations about where the best touch points are and when in the developmental process as well. And obviously now we've got our S&P committee up and running and really it's found its feet. So we've got a really great opportunity to have some of those conversations earlier versus being delivered wrapped in gold paper. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I was going to come to Councillor Lamont next as the SNP chair.
Excellent, thank you, Chair. Just helping to understand the landscape, because obviously S&P, we want to be really feeding in and helping build and shape as we can currently, how much influence do we have in the wider group is the first part of the question.
So the three, part of my job is to balance the power dynamics to enable collective agreement. So I'm aware that there are three big players in around those staff workshops, which is NZTA, ECAN and City Council. And so while we need to enable spaces for the small councils to also be able to say what they need to say in those rooms, and each council will have their own committees that also talk strategically about what they're needing to do. So we try and run a process. We can't run a process where we think about all 12 organisations' timings and sequencings of all of their committees and structures, because everybody's structured slightly differently. So we have the Canterbury Transport Officers Group, and then we're really reliant on the people coming to the RTC meeting being briefed and it being done. So I try and keep myself neutral to manage, and then
I think this just again speaks to the roles.
Yeah, the different roles, different
But in
hats.
terms of our council and the strategy and policy committee, as Amy's just mentioned, I think there's the opportunity for us to bring through as a public transport authority and our views through to the committee about what we would want to see as the RLTP develops. So the committee as a whole can then give direction, I guess, to the chair and Councillor Davies as they represent us at the RTC table. So it's briefing you on what is in development at the committee, so you can then feed your views as a council in through our representatives on, because you have delegated the authority or the development of the RLTP to the committee. It's how we as a stakeholder within that committee actually represent our views into the plan itself. But then we wear our separate hat of trying to be neutral, bringing it all together as well.
And may I ask, as good people imbued with the essence of sorry,
I'm going to ask her.
I was thinking
of knowledge of what's now and what's coming before, when you walk into your spring garden, you have some shoots, some things coming up, and other things that aren't doing so well. What trends are you seeing? Where is there hope?
I have a lot of hope in the space that I am working in, actually. I think it's a really hopeful space, and particularly in Canterbury. After doing that early engagement and seeing what is coming through and the thinking in the community and the appetite in the community and the environmental, like even looking at the so what are some of the stuff that I've done? Pulled out the air quality emissions inventory report from the science guys here to look at in each clean air zone the transport, like what parts of the transport system. So, but it's more the confluence of all of that creates opportunity. So it really is that it's like what Chair Swig said earlier. Feasible is there. It's the affordable. And so that's the hope, is that there are some really cool, feasible things, but it comes down to this affordability.
Should be our number one
piece.
Should be our number one priority is to making sure that we're getting funding equity for the South Island to a start point, and then feeding that through to the rest of the regions. Anyway, I'll bang on about that so many times I'll stop banging.
I think we're seeing with a crisis like we are with the fuel crisis, a shift towards electrification, for instance, and the opportunities that come with building the infrastructure for that, decarbonising our transport network, moving to alternatives in that respect. So that's an opportunity I see, I think, has been driven out of the fuel crisis and a change in thinking. And that's only an immediate thing. The GPS that we had the current GPS really shifted from where the previous Labor government had positioned transport, with significant investment in public transport, significant investment in active modes. which is why our LTP at the time really reflected a significant investment in public transport. But since the GPS shifted and the areas of focus and priority within that, public transport dropped down the vote, the area in favour. So we then saw a much more significant investment in roads of national significance and regional significance, and we've got opportunity now as well.
We've only got 5 minutes left, and I've got a number of people. I've got 5 more people. So, Councillor Ward.
I'm normally last. Councillor Lamont's going on about little shoots, but I'm just going to go off in a totally different direction on a shoot. Like we sit here and we talk about how we could get more people on public transport, but how are we going to get more freight on trains? I mean, I drive up and down the road most days, and there's just more and more trucks. And I mean, one person can move 1,000 tonne with a train. One truck moves 30 tonnes. And so to me, that's part of the 30-year plan as well, because years ago, when I was a little guy, 50 years ago, a lot of freight was moved up and down our railway line, and that infrastructure still sits there, but it's been totally underutilised. And to me, that's a challenge, and given the current cost of freight. So it's not only about people, it's about produce moving around Canterbury. And I know currently where apples are being grown in South Canterbury, freighted to Marlborough to be packed, and then carted back to Dunedin to be exported. So where's the food miles there?
Through you, Chair, absolutely. There's an opportunity with moving greater freight via rail. It is actually one of the targets within the current RLTP is to double freight via rail. We are working closely with Kiwi Rail. There is opportunities around freight hubbing. We've seen that in Rolleston. We've seen it in Ashburton and Fairton. There's opportunities in Hiranui as well. So that's an active space that we are working on with Kiwi Rail and have promoted as well.
And there's a paper coming to the South Island Chairs Committee meeting on Monday about this specific topic as well. I'll share that with you. Next is Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, just looking at page 21 when we've got the governance and funding, and you come across to adapt, and all the way through, I haven't heard anything about tolling, and we talk about funding. Is that going to be a consideration? Because and I'm thinking the integration with Maryland as well, because that I'm making an assumption that some of that is less accessible, but it's more tourist orientated, and there may be a funding mechanism in there.
There is an active conversation happening in Waimakere area around the Wood End bypass around tolling, but that hasn't been resolved as yet.
So the RLTP won't direct which funding mechanisms for what type of solution. That is decided by the organisation that has financial responsibility for that activity.
So
if there was any funding generated from tolling, that is into essentially the national fund, and then distributed based on the RLTP needs. But to Chair Swiggs's point around the amount of money
we're getting back here. We've got Councillor Campbell, then Davis, then we'll wrap up with Councillor Gerard.
Okay, so my question has changed completely from what I first raised my hand for, because that's the way these things go. And so what I've been working out in my head is what authority or what power we have in terms of what the RLTP says should happen. And so I landed on the bit that said if council does not approve the RLTP, it's still treated as an approved plan. Okay, got that in my head. What happens if it comes back to us and we say, this doesn't reflect our priorities? There's something in our priorities missing here. For example, and this is just an example made from the top of my head, not from saying this is our priority. But on slide 25, guidance on activity prioritisation, maintaining the network resilience, economic development, innovation and emissions reduction, all excellent and very good, but I don't see environmental impact in there, because environmental impact is more than just emissions reduction. So if it came back to us and we said, wait a minute, there's something really missing for us here. Can we send it back and ask for review? Or, what's the process?
Yes, the Act does enable you to do that. It's a once-off loop. So it's kind of like it comes to you, it can go back, and then the committee, the RTC provides you assurance of how they've covered that. So they are still essentially the content owners, and you're getting assurance that they are running a process rather than, and your kind of content contribution is as a public transport authority. So but ultimately, the back half of the document that specifies activities reflects what's provided to us by your organisation. So it shouldn't be off-piste for your organisation, because the public transport that's in there will be what's provided to us from you. And when I say us, it's like because I'm working with 12 organisations, I have to kind of think of ECAN as like one of the many 12. So sorry if I keep saying but I am you all at the same time. It's like the different hats.
So basically it's up to us as ECAN to what we feed in to say these are our priorities that we want to see represented.
It's through the chair and Councillor Davies, as I said, we will try and work through the Strategy and Policy Committee with you all to feed in through our representatives on the committee. I just appreciate, though, that this started late last year. We've been working through and time with the committee, with council at the start of this year was quite limited, as you were really focused on a lot of the RM and local government reform submissions and annual plan processes and things. So we have progressed to a point, but we'll try and incorporate views as we go forward.
Councillor Davis.
It's a good thing I'm patient. The 30-year plan, and I appreciate this is so hard because with this GPS land transport every 3 years, it's a 30-year plan. That's 10 iterations. 2 ones ago, rail was in, then rail was out, PT was, Is there a way we can, or you can with your influence, prioritize, let's just say, we want to have the freight on rail, as an example, but we're not going to go with the wind of this iteration every time. We just say, this is our priority, this is what we want. We don't care if it takes 20 years. Like, it's just in there. That's
the intent of what we're trying to do, is have a plan for Canterbury that can move within the winds of change, put it simply.
And so Councillor Gerard is more patient than you, Councillor Davis. So Councillor Gerard.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly many of my questions, especially Councillor Ward's question, really helped for my rail question. I'm going to go on to our ports, and I had a boyfriend at one stage that owned a ship that took freight from Christchurch to Wellington. So I have an interest in ports, and I'm just wondering, are we including ports in the strategy and looking at how we can use that for passenger and for freight? So we used to have a passenger ferry from Littleton to Wellington, and I'm just thinking about resilience. If we have a lot of slips on the road to Picton, could we, have alternatives for shipping? Thank you.
So ports are reflected as being kind of critical infrastructure to connect to, but the details of how that is used is in the layer below where the RLTP would sit. So a lot of the questions we receive, or I receive as RLTP, is what I would call like micro, macro is like international, national, then you've got your meso-regional, and then your local. So a lot of what local government deals with, I would get the questions for, but I'm not actually the answerer of those questions. I'm the recipient of that thinking from local government, and then reflecting that across, but kind of just shaping, like it's a slow shaping rather than a pulling of specific levers, if that makes sense.
Jesse, did you have one last thing to say there?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, for Canterbury resilience, like if Ashburton Bridge did get washed out, we could have a ship going from Timaru to Christchurch. That we could.
Jesse, did you have something?
Just to answer two of those. Sorry, we are working on a freight strategy through the South Island work. We also recognise that there isn't a port strategy for New Zealand as well, and that's an opportunity too. So I think with the passenger movement, resilience, there's a lot of conversations happening across the board in these different areas. It's how we join those conversations together. They are pieces of work that are underway as well.
All right, we're going to break for lunch.
Thank you.
We will come back at 1:05 p.m. Councillor Lamont will be chairing the afternoon session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Koto, everyone. Welcome back to our last session this afternoon, where we're looking at the government policy statement on land transport. It's going to be a great session. Looking forward to it, and I'll hand over to the staff.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. As in the previous briefing, I'll just introduce myself. Kia ora, I'm Jesse Burgess, Senior Strategy Manager. And to my left, sorry, I've got Claire Patterson, our Principal Strategy Advisor in my team, leading the Land Transport Plan development, as we just talked about. Today we're focused on the government policy statement on land transport, so I'll take you through some background information. This is focused on the 2024 GPS. This is the current GPS, not the future, but we'll get into a bit of discussion about that as well. So we've seen this, you'll get sick of seeing this slide, but yeah, it just shows where we're at in the process of briefings, as a series of briefings, as Amy, our director, mentioned earlier, the government policy statement, and then we'll be talking about the spatial plan, transport plan and regional passenger rail in the next few briefings. So the purpose of today's briefing on the GPS is to give you an overview of the role of the government policy statement on land transport in the land transport planning and funding system. We'll outline some of the direction of the current GPS and some of the feedback that the council has provided on that previously. And if we get time, we'll have a bit of a discussion as well around what we would like to see in the draft GPS 2027. As we talked about, that's underline the importance of that.
Thanks, Jesse. Can we do questions as we go through to sort of break it up?
Jesse, are you comfortable with that? Yep, we can.
Thanks.
Apologies. The work on the GPS, sorry, just throw my position here, but the Canterbury Mayoral Forum and Canterbury Regional Transport Committee are also have provided in the past and will do in the future as well, a joint submission on the draft GPS. And the Greater Christchurch Partnership has also in the past provided submissions to government on the draft GPSs to influence the direction that we would like to see for Greater Christchurch, Canterbury, and we've also had submissions through the South Island Regional Transport Committee Chairs Group as well, to provide that collective advocacy from the South Island joint chairs. The GPS sets out the government's land transport strategy. It outlines what the government expects to be achieved from investment through the National Land Transport Fund and its direct Crown funding. It outlines how much funding will be provided and how the funding will be raised. It outlines how the government will achieve its outcomes and priorities through investment in certain areas known as activity classes. So you've heard us talk about public transport activity class. This is the sort of funding ranges that you will see in the National Land Transport plan around the level of investment that the government sees in different parts of the transport sector. The GPS also sets out the statement of the Minister's expectations for NZTA Waka Kotahi on how they are to give effect to the GPS. The next slide here is how does the GPS guide land transport funding decisions. So it sets out the government's priorities for a 10-year period, but the real focus is on the next 3 years. It provides direction on the types of activities that should be included in regional land transport plans and then subsequently the National Land Transport Program. The diagram on the right-hand side shows how on the right-hand side you've got the different funding streams that influence the National Land Transport Fund, and then you've got on the left-hand side the government policy statement that the regional land transport plan that we just talked about needs to be consistent with. And then when we do develop the regional land transport plan, those are collated nationally into the National Land Transport Program. And there's a prioritisation exercise that happens there around how that funding is distributed. And just noted there as well, the National Land Transport Fund is topped up by Crown funding in the form of grants and loans as well. Focusing on...
Just one moment, Councillor Moody.
Excuse me.
Thanks, Jesse. I'll just slow you down to make sure I'm taking it in. So this is a fund that the central government has. They used to do things in the transport space at the regional scale. Is that what this box is showing?
All the funding on the right-hand side there on the diagram, the fuel excise duties, road user charges, track user charges, motor vehicle registrations and licensing, talked about tolls, congestion charging, those type of things. They're all opportunities that revenue streams that feed into the National Land Transport Fund. When all of the different regional regions put their regional land transport bids to government, that collective bid then needs to be prioritised across different areas, which is outlined in the GPS. So you've got those different activity classes. I'll set those different levels of funding and where their priorities sit. And then, so what we see when it comes down into a regional land transport plan level, you'll see some things that may get funded, other things may not, maybe not to the extent necessarily that we're expecting. So
the prioritisation is at like a macro activity level when they're managing those buckets of money. So they will just prioritise PT against a bucket of money. They're not going to say, and then they will use financial decision-making tools. So they've got an investment prioritisation tool. So it's not a transport planning tool, it's an investment tool that looks at like money. And that will then look at how much money they've got and how they manage that fund. And so they do have things like over-programming so they can manage the money. They're not deciding what gets proposed when they manage that.
Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, going back to the funding, and I just before lunch, Chair Swiggs got quite wound up about a couple of funding issues. Can I get can we get some explanation on that bucket of money, where it comes from, where it's going to, a la what Chair Swiggs was talking about, because I would probably like to get wound up too.
Giles.
Don't want to, but I know that James Cahill from NZTA was very keen as part of Council's overall induction to come and talk to Council about the role of NZTA and where it fits in. So it might be appropriate for him to come and talk about the overall way in which government funding works, and then you hear it literally from the horse's mouth. Unless
happy to facilitate that as well. There are a range of activity classes. I think it's 16 activity classes across the board that funding out of that pool on the right-hand side, the National Land Transport Fund, needs to be divvied up into all those different activity classes. So when we bid as a region, we might bid a particular level of investment, as will other regions across the country, but there may only be a bucket of money available to achieve outcomes within those different sections. So like PT, for instance, public transport, there's a range normally when they look at how much they could invest in public transport and then have to balance that across the rest of the investment in the transport sector. Last GPS, it was at the lower level of funding because there was a pitch more towards roads of national significance, maintenance, renewals, etc. So we saw a swing in the amount of investment that was pitched towards public transport. When you look at us, Auckland, Wellington, other Dunedin, etc., who all bid for public transport funding, that level of bid may outweigh the level that's available. And that's where the challenge is. And we're also not, as Chair Swiggs was pointing out, and we'll come to that in the slides, the level of investment into Canterbury's projects and prioritisation has been a lot less than what we're expecting over the last wee while. And we'll touch on that a bit further if you like when we get to that slide. I think it might be useful, but definitely, as Giles has mentioned, I think it would be useful to have James Cahill from NZTA as the Director of Regional Relationships to come and speak to that in a bit more detail about that national level prioritisation work.
Councillor Gerard.
It seems like when you have the funding coming from road user charges and motor vehicles and this sort of thing, there's actually a disincentive to have public transport because that doesn't pay for it. You know, that how you get the funding is through people trucks on the road. So the train freight on trains doesn't help this funding package, does it?
So if you think about funding in a system, if I explore the rail freight movement, if you were to move more freight arguably onto rail and less on the road, you potentially have less impact on your roads. So maintenance, state highways, local roads, maintenance becomes less of an issue, not entirely, but less of, and you may potentially invest less. So there's more money in the collective pool to put into other areas. Moving people onto public transport absolutely has a range of co-benefits that we've talked about as well. And particularly things like health, air pollution, health impacts as well. We know that there's far more people die from health-related impacts from transport than actually when we talk about safety on the roads as well. So DSIs, deaths and serious injuries. So it's a system of funding across a range of different areas. But if you think about things like the fuel crisis at the moment and the amount of diesel available in the country, and if we could move more freight via rail potentially, there's other co-benefits in that regard as well. I don't know if Claire wants to say anything else.
The road user charges is a policy tool as well as a user pays mechanism, so that the more you use the road, the more you are damaging it, so the more you are responsible for paying for it, almost like a polluter pays type mechanism. So and other countries who have traditionally used tax to fund transport are looking at road user charges because of the affordability aspect and making those costs more visible to people, because it's quite hidden when you have it as a tax, and it's more visible to people, the true costs of transport when it's as a user charge. So there are benefits to having a road user charge system as well as disbenefits, but it's the central government who will make those trade-offs.
On that, the diesel those are the vehicles with road user charges. Now the electric vehicles, petrol vehicles are not paying it.
Yes, they are. I pay it.
No.
Yes. Sorry.
No.
Your EV is paying RUCs, and your diesel trucks are paying RUCs. Your farmers run tractors; they don't pay RUCs, but they're also trying to do like road safety out of this fund, like stop people dying on that. So this fund is trying to fund 16 different things. It's kind of crazy. We need to charge the petrol cars. Sorry.
Right, we might move forward, or else we'll be here all afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. We are moving towards road user charges for petrol vehicles, so that is the direction that the government is taking. So just on to the next slide. So the GPS 2024 really focused on system reform, particularly in the strategic priority areas of economic growth and productivity, maintenance and resilience, safety and value for money out of the investments that we're making. There was a real focus on roads of national and regional significance, and on the map on the right-hand side of the screen there, you'll see in the Canterbury's context some of those the roads of national and regional significance packages, all of which have progressed through this current period of the GPS, which is good to see for Canterbury. As we talked about earlier, the Greater Christchurch PT Futures program and Mass Rapid Transit work program are not included as major PT projects in this GPS. That's something that we've been advocating for. It gives that level of direction from the government policy statement that we would like to see the relevant investment down into the public transport activity class to enable that work to continue here in Greater Christchurch. Also, South Island bridges are identified as being critically important for resilience. And I mentioned earlier the South Island Regional Transport Committee Chairs Group, which Chair Swiggs and Councillor Davies sit on. A piece of work that we've been doing through that work was a South Island vulnerability assessment as part of looking at the whole entire transport network and where is the vulnerability challenges, resilience challenges in that. And potentially out of that, there might be the opportunity to look at infrastructure as part of where we invest in the most critical infrastructure and build that resilience across the South Island, obviously including Canterbury in that respect. So that's the essential direction of where the GPS was headed in 2024. There's also been a shift towards requiring future GPSs to take more of a 10-year investment plan, so thinking longer term. There's also been the discussion of regional deals between central and local government to integrate that longer term thinking, strategic thinking and planning across the transport system. There's also a ministerial expectation for NZTA to develop a more efficient business case process. So we've been working through that with our public transport work, as have all the other councils with their infrastructure programs as well. And also progress on considering future opportunities around land transport revenue, and Claire has been involved in quite a lot of that work actually at a Te Uta Kahika level with the transport sector interest groups. So we've been really influential in that space, supporting Ministry of Transport and NZTA. Also looking at centralised procurement and also the fast tracking of some of the nationally important transport infrastructure. So you've seen some of those projects go through the fast track process. For PT, we have talked about this previously as well. There's a much greater focus on fare box recovery and third-party revenue to support PT costs and improvements. There's an expectation in the GPS around looking at alternative sources of funding, and we've touched on tolls. There's time of use charging, so that congestion charging, cruise ships, the stadium. There's been lots of different discussions over the journey. As I said earlier, we didn't see the PT Futures and MRT program signalled in the GPS, but we did see Auckland and Wellington receive that recognition for the public transport investments. Again, that's exactly what we want to see down here in Greater Christchurch for us as a city here. As I said before too, the public transport and GPS 2024 was funded at the lower level of the activity class, not the upper level, which is where we'd actually like to see the opportunities fit for public transport investment. The other thing with walking and cycling, so our active modes as well, NZTA taking a different perspective in terms of funding those opportunities. You really had to demonstrate through the business case process that economic growth or improving safety opportunities. So not just building in an active mode network alongside a bridge or a state highway or whatnot. So that was really the shift towards the roads of the roading focus of the GPS. So just outlined here some of the matters that we raised as a council on GPS 2024. So we've touched on already a number of times today about the unequitable share of the national fund, and I'll come to a slide on that in just a second. We support the emphasis on increasing maintenance and resilience of the transport network. Absolutely, those are good investments. But we did raise the concern around the lack of commitment to public transport in Canterbury, so particularly in Greater Christchurch. We asked, as I said, to have the Greater Christchurch PT Futures program recognised alongside Auckland and Wellington. We did raise concern about the blanket approach to PT fare box recovery and third-party revenue. It differs across the country in that respect. We did ask for that additional funding to go into the public transport activity class in the GPS, and we also urged the government to progress the review of the land transport funding system to be more sustainable going forward into GPS 2027. And I will recognise Claire for a lot of work with the transport sector interest group in the funding space. That actually was a nationally led piece of work. So, yeah. This is a slide that I'm sure we'll have a number of questions around, but And Claire was instrumental in pulling this together for the previous council and for the Regional Transport Committee. But you'll see there for Canterbury, so when we look at population for Canterbury in 2024, the gross domestic product, GDP, and also our vehicle kilometres travelled, you'll see with most of the other regions, it's sort of consistent across the board, and so what funding level they receive is sort of commensurate to their population, GDP and VKT. Canterbury is considerably lower, and that's the challenge that we have. To actually be able to do the work that we need to do in Canterbury, we need the funding, and that's it's an investment into Canterbury. It's not just a handout. It's not us asking for a handout. We're looking to invest in our transport network for economic productivity, growth, the benefits that come from all of this investment. So that slide there has been used a number of times by the RTC, both with ministers in advocacy roles and trying to put that message across the central government that we need to see greater funding into Canterbury.
Thanks, Jessie. That's absolutely sobering. I'd just like to go to Councillor Davies.
Just looking at the small print here. So 7% distributed for police, rail, national ticketing solution, SURF. Could you just talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so the that 7% of the non-regionalised spend, when you export it from the NLTP, it NTS is, although it's done here, it's a national project. The state highway spend is broken down by region, so I could do that with it. No, rail is not. So it's just RNIP is one big line, and police is RPIP. So Regional Police Investment Plan and the Regional and the Rail Network Investment Plan. So police is about 5%, rail is 2%, and they're not broken down regionally, but they will be within that, but not within the export that I have access to. It's probably a reasonable assumption that the police and rail investment would probably still follow that regional pattern.
So do you think it's VKT is probably a slightly, because of that 11% is slightly skews it to seem as though, but most regions actually have less percentage than their GDP as a percentage of the fund? Just looking through it, like Auckland has 38% of GDP, but it gets 31%. So, it's definitely concerning that we only get 5%. But just
for transport investment, when I was creating this, what I was trying to achieve was understand if everything shifted to RUC, what it might look like. And that's when I uncovered this. So this wasn't designed initially to try and find where the funding's going. It was more designed to look at, well, what if you kind of use VKT as a proxy and it's pretty stable over 20 years as a proportion, and how much RUC might be generated and come in. And that's when I kind of saw this trend. So, and it's based on a standard deviation range. And it was like, should I be using VKT as a good indicator, or GDP, or popular? What would be good? And so that's what it looks like.
just the supplementary from me so we see in 2015 to 18 we got 11%. So we had a much bigger percentage of the total, and we've only gone up 200 million circa since then. Is that a post-earthquake boost?
I haven't looked into the details of what's underneath the 1.58 and the 1.7. I do know with the 1.8, about 0.3 of that I believe is the Woodend bypass. And so the 1.5 is... but what's also been increasing is inflation. So if you're looking at raw dollar values, we're effectively going backwards, even if there was a post-earthquake boost. But my understanding of the cost share agreement was that there was some transport costs in that one-off boost, but it was largely restorative. It wasn't even the costs of doing the transport network around the anchor projects were not included in that.
I actually think Kaikoura might be in there, Because there's a big drop from 21 to 24.
Happy to bring back some further advice around going back and looking at the 2015-18 Regional Land Transport Plan.
Yep.
Councillor Campbell.
Can you explain to me the 7% distributed for NZ Police? How does that fit in with a transport fund? What's their input?
So that's all the road policing, so speed and all of that. Yeah.
John.
Just going back to page 9, the slide, and walking and cycling projects must demonstrate clear benefit or improving safety. And and one of the things I think about quite often being a cyclist is that I used to love travelling down Otago, Queenstown on the bike, and talking to Councillor Moody today, there's no way in hell I'd travel down there because it's not safe. So we're kind of doing ourselves a disservice in tourism. Cycling touring is quite a popular sport, and we're cutting ourselves out from a safety perspective, aren't we?
To answer that and not be speaking on behalf of NZTA in that respect, but certainly the opportunities to reduce costs in terms of the major infrastructure projects that they're developing, including the walking and cycling and other aspects, in addition to, say, building a new road of national significance, another motorway development. It really needed to be, it was quite a high bar for them to invest in the walking and cycling benefits of that as well, when you're dealing with constrained costs as well. So that's kind of why that direction was taken. It was not lots of other previous projects included walking and cycling.
I think there was a significant shift in this GPS. If you think about the northern motorway and the southern motorway, they've both got cycle lanes next to them, which were part of the cost of building it. Current GPS separates those, and you have to justify the cycling on its own, which makes it very hard to justify. But actually, there's such a small percentage of the cost of the total project.
Do accept your point, though, about the broader tourism opportunities, and that's actually something that we are looking at the South Island level as well, because it's a South Island regional chairs coming together, thinking about tourism flows across the South Island, and it has been raised. Councillor Kate Wilson of Otago has raised a number of times around cycling tourism and the opportunities for that as well. So that's something that we are looking at as part of the work program there too.
There are some cycle routes, tourism routes in Canterbury that's on private land, so it runs alongside the corridor, but on the private farm, well, used to be farm, now cycleway land as well. So that's still an opportunity.
It paints a very grim picture, and from my perspective, metaphorically speaking, sort of nailing the central government politicians to the wall, how do they respond to these sobering numbers?
I guess what we, in terms of the funding, we've continued to advocate for greater funding into Canterbury, and we keep promoting the projects that will benefit from an economic growth perspective. And I guess, speaking the language of the current government in terms of economic productivity and growth and resilience and those type of things, things like our public transport futures and MRT investment is critical to the continued growth and change of our city here in Christchurch. So you need to tie that to the funding conversation, recognising that we, it is the second largest city in the country. We do need to put that investment, build on that investment, and there's a real opportunity there. So we can bridge that gap of funding if we can get that funding and recognition of those sort of key projects. And it's not just that PT Futures and MRT investment, it's also investment in our roading, our infrastructure for freight movement and those type of things as well. So how do we continue to build that fund up? Whereas Councillor Davies said before, you've seen it go down. We need to see that progressively go back up again. And that's to the South Island. It's not just actually for Canterbury. It's a South Island challenge, which I showed on the slide there. The South Island contributes 22% of the national GDP and 26% of national movements, VKT, but we only receive 12% of the NLTF.
So therein lies the opportunity for councillors to advocate for us in the South Island.
And Chair Swiggs and Councillor Davies are actually meeting with the Regional Transport Committee Chairs Group, South Island, on Monday, and we actually have Minister Meager attending that meeting as well, virtually, so there'll be an opportunity to speak to the Minister for the South Island and Associate Transport Minister about some of these challenges.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. Just the 1% other NZTA costs. Now, would that include, previously I used to work on a lot of NZTA projects, and we were doing a lot of stormwater works and working with urban design and multimodal designs, and so all that sort of, is that being included still?
That's still within the regional allocation. What's the 1% other NZTA costs is there's a transport security item in there, which I don't know the details of, but is linked to sort of anti-terrorism understanding and use of the transport system. So there is just some stuff in there that is like, it's that 1% that NZTA does that is kind of like for the whole country, that isn't network infrastructure and isn't public transport services. But what's in those regions is the network infrastructure and the public transport services for both state highways, the whole bit. Yeah.
Yeah, carry on.
Thank you. So we have the upcoming consultation on the draft GPS 2027, which Giles mentioned earlier is due to land mid-May, May, June. We're not quite sure exactly when that's going to land, but that's all the indications that we have at this stage. I understand the council will likely want to provide feedback on that, recognising the conversations we've been having, both with our Public Transport Authority hat on and also our regional leadership role. I expect that the Mayoral Forum and the Regional Transport Committee would also like to make a submission on this and have done so previously, and also the South Island Regional Transport Committee Chairs Group would likely make a submission as well. We'll have some discussions probably at a Greater Christchurch partnership level, given the importance of public transport, as we've talked about, to the aspirations of the Greater Christchurch spatial plan and development there. So lots of opportunities to make submissions. We'll know more about the timeframes for that, and we'll work with you, Councillor Lamont, as part of the Strategy and Policy Committee to work through what a submission might look like as well. We'll work with you on the key matters to be raised in that submission. I expect that probably a lot of what we've asked for previously will probably be still relevant, acknowledging where there has been some gains as well, but advocating for what we need to see as investment, both from a public transport authority, but also benefiting the Greater Christchurch and Canterbury region. I think that's probably where we're at. I'd be interested to, if there's any, just on what we could expect from the GPS 2027. So I think this has been a bit of a moving feast, just with obviously the current crisis around fuel. I think there'll be a bit of a potential rethink about some aspects of the GPS going forward. So we'll wait and see where that sort of the signals that we have been getting, but where this might actually land might be a little bit different. The value for money, strategic prioritisation, and given the current economic context, those will be things that we would expect to see through here. And there's obviously a big reform program as well that's been underway, so we'll see how that's reflected as well in the GPS 2027. Is there anything you want to add from your...
Yeah, we do get regular updates because it's the whole sector all planning together all at once. There's a lot of collaborative meetings, and we do get updates on where they're at in their work program development. And so where they're at with financial forecasting and things like that, and when that's likely to drop in the timings of that. But right now we've got a meeting next week, but I'm not sure if people will turn up because of the global context shift in terms of fuel and how that might have affected forecasting. If I was working in the Ministry of Transport right now in the GPS, I'd probably be having to rewrite tone, pitch, the whole thing if it's going to land in the next even within the next 6 months. So, but I haven't caught up with the new people leading that yet.
Just make a note too, we're very conscious of the draft GPS when it comes out, linked to the development of the Regional Land Transport Plan and us being consistent with the GPS. We've also got an election at the end of the year, so if there was a change in government, we may see a different GPS, likely see a different GPS. And so therefore we've got to be quite agile, if you like, with our regional land transport plan development so that we can then pivot towards a different direction from government. And we did see that in the last regional land transport plan review. We had a plan developed and then had to go back and look at the new GPS that came out with the change in government. So it did throw a cat amongst the pigeons, if you like, there in developing that plan. So just a point to note.
Thank you, staff. That was a wonderful presentation. And I'd just like to start with questions, and we'll start at the outstanding far left of the chamber with Councillor Davis.
The Christchurch NZ Economic Ambition, they have that, and they also have a regional ambition for the region. Do you guys work with Christchurch NZ?
Yes, we do. So through the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, I actually sit on the Economic Development Forum as our representative there, and the Christchurch NZ has a representative on that forum. We have been working with Business Canterbury as well, Leanne Watson and her team around the Canterbury Ambition, and also the discussions we've been having, early discussions around potential future regional deals and what that might look like as well. Yep. Yeah. And transport is a key pillar within all of those conversations, absolutely, alongside energy, infrastructure, housing. Yep.
Councillor Campbell.
I was just frantically trying to work out what we've actually seen and what we haven't, and didn't quite get there in time. So thoughts going through my mind. Thoughts going through my mind about what you've just mentioned, the connection between energy and transport, and is using the concept of energy sovereignty one way to perhaps move the dial a bit in talking to central government, not so much talking about we need more PT or we need more whatever, but actually as a country we need much more energy sovereignty. I kind of feel like that might be a message that lands a bit better.
It's funny you say that, because we were just having that conversation this morning, exact same thing, talking about energy sovereignty and thinking about our sustainability and having an energy system that supports the transition towards different ways of operating our transport networks. So it is investment into infrastructure, it is investment into renewable energy, electricity generation to fund a transition of our fleet, so that we are more self-sustainable, if you like, and less reliant on the global context.
I think even couching it not so much in terms of sustainability, but in terms of economic benefit, that less of our GDP goes offshore and it actually stays here. I get the sense that a conversation like that might be better listened to.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go now to Councillor Moody, then Faulkner, then Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, guys. A similar question to Councillor Campbell's, but as a question, where is the overlap? The priorities of this government. What would be good for our transport in Canterbury? Where have you seen the sweet spot where you go, okay, this this is what we're advocating for currently that fits? Is it charging stations for cars because they're more focused on roads than on public transport? Or is there any? Do you understand the question? Is it clear?
Absolutely got the flow of that conversation, that question. So I think it's an investment and lift in the entire system. It's not just one part over another, and this is probably what we've seen over the last two GPSs. Really, is we've seen the push towards more public transport and active modes, then move through to more road maintenance renewals, roads of national significance. Where do we pivot back into more of a balanced investment across a range of different aspects of the transport system? So public transport for us as a regional council, and investment into that is and with our TA partners is critical. But investment in infrastructure for the decarbonisation of our transport network and that energy sovereignty discussion is critical as well. It'll be interesting to see where, with things like the fuel crisis, where the government starts to pivot and change its perspective, if at all, maybe towards some of those opportunities that might not necessarily be funded out of the regional land transport, the National Land Transport Fund, but opportunities with other investments and partnerships with central government, particularly in infrastructure, is an opportunity as well.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thanks, Jessie. Claire. I'm just thinking of the Bainans Road issue there, and we've got James involved in that discussion. We've got an upset community in Canterbury where we are extracting gravel, gravel out of the rivers, and it's going to be quite a demand on getting the level of gravel out for the roading, but it's also creating a community angst problem. And there does seem to be a lack of integration with that component of it. And I just wondered is it possible to have that conversation and say, okay, we're going to build this major road. We're doing it from extracting gravel from the Waimak, for instance. The population is growing. It's going to be a problem that's going to increase over time. As part of the infrastructure deal, we need to have a sound, paid-for access route into the gravel extraction site that doesn't annoy the heck out of the community. So is that something that you could put in there?
That's at the project-specific negotiation. So if you think of projects as part of activities, and then activities and buckets of, so what I would say is the supermajority of aggregate used in the transport system is from quarries. So the use of river gravel in the transport system is a Canterbury-specific issue. And so it's not likely to get reflected in a government policy statement. And if it was reflected, it might reflect it in terms of if it's an issue in your region. So the government policy statement is probably not the right lever to push on to change what's happening there.
I agree with Claire. I think this is when you get down into the development of a project and the negotiations that would happen around how that actually unfolds, that's where the opportunities would lie to part of our gravel authorisations and the opportunity for that movement of gravel to a particular site for a particular project. What are the effects associated with that, and how do we negate some of those effects as well? Might be something, as Giles mentioned, with James potentially coming along to speak to council about the funding. Might also be something about how NZTA particularly undertakes major projects, and where that agreement around how those effects are mitigated is part of that discussion as well.
Councillor Robinson.
Apologies if this has already been discussed. I've been trying to type other bits and pieces. I'm just looking at the model Australia uses for taxing at the pump, and I personally think that's the fairest model. Well, I think they do it well, and they've done it well for a long time. So based under the federal tax rate, it's 52 cents per litre on fuel, petrol and diesel, and they're going through the EV version at the moment based on 2.6 cents per kilometre. Now, the thing, that is driven at a, state level, and the federal rules apply to all. And I think that's a really fair way to look at it because it gets taxed accordingly. You don't have to think about it or get penalised for forgetting, which a lot of people do, including myself. The other big thing I think we need to actually consider going forward, considering it's going to be a nationwide sort of approach, is the increase in vehicles of 4.5 tonnes or more used for mining, extraction, not just quarrying or gravel extraction. We're looking at an increase quite substantially for minerals extraction. If we look at the model of Otago right now, around 80% of the mineable area is currently for proposed permit. It's been applied to. If we look at how they could be penalised by not having the proportion right either, we need to look at the whole overall picture, I think, of the nation and going forward, all these heavy units on the road, and in saying that the pollution from the tyres and how that's one of the highest rates of plastics and rubbers in the environment, and heavy metals, yes. And so I think this needs to be considered going forward too. The heavy traffic is going to increase, and I don't think the small users should be penalised.
So in terms of the GPS, the best place to influence that, looking at the structure of the current GPS, is where they've talked about safety. So there's an activity class in there that is called safety, but what it actually covers is NZTA's regulatory function, which is largely focused on safety. So if you wanted to put a submission into the GPS, when it comes out, we can have a look at where it's talking about environmental impacts, how it's talking about NZTA's regulatory function, and see if it's talking about a shift towards environmental or other impacts away from safety. It is a bit of a strategic pivot at the moment in the transport sector from safety having been the kind of PO since about the 80s. And it is shifting now towards resilience and emissions reduction, and it's the economic development, which is part of that kind of the environment and community working together. So we'll see.
With regards to what I think it was Andrea said earlier about road user charges and how farming operations may be exempt. What about huge caterpillar equipment like mining entities on private spaces? They're exempt as well? Yeah, I'm just asking a question. Okay, goodness me,
I was just going to your question, Councillor Robinson. I was going to say, as off the back of what Claire was saying, the road user charges. So where we've got vehicles on the road, particularly those diesel vehicles on the road, the question would be: have we got the right settings for those road user charges as a user pay system to accommodate the level of environmental impact, damage to the roads, etc., from those types of industries? So if you're seeing heavier vehicles on the road, potentially they're having more damage to the roads. Do they pay their fair share of the cost? That's the...
Just to clarify, is that some paper roads are used to obtain access to mines, or you go along a public road to get to where you're going on private land. And the same thing applies to some farm vehicles. Some of them are massive, the harvesters. Yeah. Do they pay a proportion of... No, they don't. I think that needs to change. Why shouldn't they?
This has been looked at previously, so we can bring something back about that. I think it was looked at by the government within the last 5 years anyway, and some of it is to do with the cost of trade-off in terms of the cost of implementing versus how frequently those vehicles do that. So it might actually be a disbenefit to try and implement, but that may shift over time. I don't know.
Okay, I've got another question, Councillor Ward.
Agricultural vehicles are exempt from road user charges. So when you register them, they come under a different class, which is an exempt class. So they do not pay any road users. And then if you, like a truck, if you're using it on a road and on a farm, you have like e-road now where you pay when you're on the road and you don't pay when you're on your own property, which is fair and equitable.
Any other questions before we close for the day? Okay, who's on karakia? Thank you, staff. It was very good.
So we'll be coming back to you on the 23rd of April to give you a bit of a briefing on the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan and Transport Plan. Again, it's sort of looking backwards on the work that we've done over the last few years in that respect, and also give you some information around regional passenger rail, and also we'll talk about some of the opportunities around freight as well in that regard. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate the questions. We'll bring back another briefing once we know the detail of the draft GPS 2027, and we'll have a conversation with council around submission points and things for that, and take note of all the questions we've had today as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Nick.
Okay, closing karakia. Unihia ki te uru tapunui, ki a wātia, ki a māma, te nāko, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takata. Koe ora e rongo, whakaarea aki ki ronga, ki a tina, hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you, everybody. Be safe, travel well. It's constituency week next week, so see you in 2 weeks.